Blink timing syncs conversations. You blink more than 15,000 times a day. But what if I told you that every blink is more than a biological reflex? That it's not just about keeping your eyes moist or shielding them from dust, but a hidden language your brain uses to bond with others? Welcome to the strange, silent rhythm of human connection, where blink timing subtly shapes the way we talk, feel, and trust. Imagine you're deep in conversation. Not a debate, not small talk, but one of those rare moments where everything feels aligned. The kind of connection where words flow, laughter lands just right, and you lose track of time. Now, slow that moment down, frame by frame. You'll see something eerie. Your blinks and theirs sync, almost like you're sharing a neural beat. Not quite identical, but rhythmically close enough that your brains recognize a pattern. This isn't coincidence, it's biology. Studies using high-speed eye tracking have shown that people in close, engaging conversations tend to blink at the same time. It's more likely between friends, less between strangers, and almost non-existent when the interaction is fake or forced. Why? Because blinking is deeply tied to our internal thought processes. Your brain times your blinks to naturally occur at moments when you're not absorbing new information, like at the end of a sentence or a dramatic pause. And when someone else does the same, it creates an unconscious sense of synchrony. This synchrony is ancient. In the animal kingdom, synchronizing movement is a powerful social glue. Think of birds flying in murmuration, or wolves walking in stride. Humans aren't exempt. We mirror body language, adjust vocal tone, even shift breathing rhythms without realizing it. But blinking, because it happens so quickly and so often, may be the most intimate synchrony of all, and the most overlooked. Here's where it gets stranger. In a Japanese study, researchers played TV shows to volunteers and monitored their blinking. Participants consistently blinked during scene cuts or pauses, moments of low narrative content. But more importantly, they blinked at the same moments as each other. Their brains collectively decided when it was safe to stop watching. It's as if blinking isn't just about your own brain, it's about agreement with the shared story. Now, apply this to daily life. In conversation, your blinks are part of an invisible dance. You're not just expressing ideas, you're signaling when you're ready to hear more, when you're thinking, when it's okay for the other person to speak. And when those blink rhythms align, it feels like harmony, like someone gets you. This may be why moments of deep connection often leave no memory of the blinks, just the bond. But this power can be broken. If you've ever spoken to someone who barely blinks or blinks at erratic times, it feels off, like something isn't clicking. That's because your brain is always scanning for subtle timing cues. And when they're missing or mismatched, your subconscious reacts. You feel unsettled without knowing why. In fact, some researchers suggest this may explain why robots and CGI characters with incorrect blinking patterns feel creepy. The uncanny valley might start with the eyes. There's also a darker side to this. People with certain neurological disorders, such as Parkinson's or schizophrenia, often lose natural blink timing, not just in frequency, but in synchronicity with others. They blink too much, or not enough, or at the wrong moments. And it can lead to feelings of disconnection or social discomfort, not because they don't want connection, but because the rhythm is off. Now think of actors, therapists, negotiators. They master this rhythm. Watch closely during interviews or performances, and you'll see how intentionally timed blinks can draw someone in or push them away. A well-timed blink after a question feels open, thoughtful. Too early, and it seems dismissive. Too late, and it feels rehearsed. Your brain notices, even if you don't. But the most poetic aspect of synchronized blinking, it's that it's invisible when it matters most. You don't notice it in real time. You only feel the result: trust, flow, connection. It's one of the few nonverbal signals that the conscious mind ignores, but the subconscious craves. And in a world overloaded with speech and screens, maybe it's comforting to know that your brain still longs for rhythm, for quiet agreement, for blinking together. So, next time you find yourself in a conversation that just works, don't just listen to the words. Feel the silence between them, the pauses, the blink that happens when both minds take a breath at the same time. You're not just talking, you're synchronizing. And maybe, in those tiny shared moments, you're more connected than you think. Mirrors trigger empathy loops. When you see someone cry, you might feel tears sting your eyes too. You're not doing it out of sympathy. It's not a conscious decision. It's a biological script. Silent, ancient, involuntary. Your body begins to mirror what you see. The sadness doesn't belong to you, yet you feel it anyway. This is the work of the mirror neuron system, a neural network designed to simulate the emotions and actions of others, quietly running in the background of your mind like emotional code. And what it reveals is both deeply human and slightly unnerving. Your brain is constantly practicing the feelings of those around you, even when you don't realize it. Discovered in the 1990s by neuroscientists observing monkeys, mirror neurons fire not only when an individual performs an action, but also when they see someone else do the same. A monkey reaching for a peanut activates the same neurons in its brain as watching another monkey reach. Then we realized, humans do this with emotion. You don't just see a smile, you partially simulate the joy behind it. You don't just watch grief, you feel an echo of it. This isn't empathy as philosophy, it's empathy as physics. Your brain is wired to reflect, not just observe. Think of it like standing in front of a mirror, but the reflection isn't yours, it's theirs. Their sorrow, their pain, their laughter, their fear. Your brain paints a ghostly copy of their state onto your internal canvas, and this happens so fast, you usually never notice. When you flinch watching someone get hurt in a movie, when your chest tightens as someone tells a heartbreaking story, when you find yourself smiling because someone else is, those are empathy loops. These loops aren't just emotional, they're contagious. Studies show that yawning, laughter, crying, even pain can be socially transferred. In one study, participants watched others receive mild electric shocks. The observers' pain centers lit up almost identically, even though they weren't being touched. Another study had people watch videos of others in emotional distress. Within seconds, stress hormones spiked. The body reacted as if it were under threat, not because it was, but because it was witnessing threat. The brain doesn't always make distinctions between watching and doing, between their feelings and yours. And that's where it becomes quietly terrifying. If your brain reflects others, who are you really feeling? Is that anxiety in your chest yours? Or did it drift in from someone sitting across the room? Have you ever entered a space and suddenly felt tension without knowing why? Chances are, your mirror neurons picked up the emotional tone before your conscious mind did. You inherited someone else's feelings through invisible reflection. Mirror neurons blur the line between self and other. They are why actors can move us, why crowds shift in shared emotion, why riots erupt and laughter spreads. They are why you might feel alone in a room full of sad people. Not because no one sees you, but because your brain sees them and carries their weight. There's also a deeper implication, because these loops train us. The more we reflect anger, fear, stress, or sadness from those around us, the more practiced those neural patterns become. Empathy loops aren't always healing. Sometimes they trap us. In toxic work environments, in unstable relationships, in online spaces charged with outrage, your brain keeps mirroring and mirroring until their pain becomes your script. You begin to perform it without knowing. But the reverse is also true. Kindness spreads, calm spreads, relief spreads. A study from the University of California found that witnessing small acts of kindness activated mirror neurons in bystanders, causing emotional elevation and increased generosity. One person helping another can ripple through an entire room. It's not just moral, it's biological. Mirror neurons pass on emotion like relay batons. And the most haunting part? This system runs beneath your awareness. You do not control it. You do not approve it. It is faster than your conscious mind, older than your culture, deeper than your language. You are not merely reacting to the world. You are rehearsing it, every single moment. So when you see someone's lips quiver, or their hands tremble, or their voice crack, pause. Notice the echo inside you. That flutter of emotion might not be yours. It might be a loop, a reflection, a script written by evolution to keep us connected, even at the cost of our clarity. In that sense, we're all mirrors walking through mirrors, reacting, reflecting, reverberating. What we see in others becomes what we carry in ourselves. And in a world increasingly saturated with screens, performances, and public breakdowns, we must ask, what emotional scripts are we unknowingly copying? Are we choosing what we feel, or are we absorbing it? The next time you tear up without knowing why, or get goosebumps from a stranger's pain, Or feel joy rise in your throat because someone smiled. Remember, it's not weakness. It's not manipulation. It's not drama. It's your mirror neurons pulling you into their loop, not to trap you, but to remind you you were never truly alone in your feelings. You were built to feel the world around you. Smiles are micro-agreements. A smile is not just a curve of the lips, it's a key, a micro-agreement, a primal gesture that whispers, "I mean no harm," before language, before laws, before borders or contracts. We had smiles. They were the first social handshake, silently exchanged across fires, forests, and fields, ensuring that neither party would strike. In every culture, in every age, the smile has survived. But why? What makes it so powerful, so universal, so disarming? We think of smiling as joy, laughter, happiness, but the truth is stranger, more primitive, more coded. In evolutionary terms, the smile is not just emotional, it's strategic. To bare the teeth slightly without aggression is a sign of submission, of peace. Among primates, it's a behavior rooted in survival. When a chimpanzee wants to avoid conflict, it draws its mouth back in a grin, not because it's amused, but because it wants to live. It's saying, "You're stronger, let's not fight." Humans kept the gesture, refined it, and used it for more than safety. We began to smile to charm, to connect, to deceive. Because a smile isn't always truth. It can be armor. Think of the cashier who smiles at rude customers, the actor on stage smiling through heartbreak, the spy flashing a grin while plotting betrayal. Smiles can mean anything, and that's what makes them dangerous. They're accepted without question, trusted by default. You see someone smile and your brain releases oxytocin, dopamine, endorphins. It doesn't ask if the smile is real. It rewards the gesture anyway. It wants to believe. That's the trick. Smiles are shortcuts, bypassing your defenses, triggering automatic reciprocity. A smile offered is almost always returned, even unconsciously. You smile at a stranger, and they smile back. Two brains syncing momentarily, both saying, "I accept your presence." Even in crowded cities where trust is thin and pace is fast, a smile cuts through noise like a handshake between souls. But it's more than politeness. It's a form of control. Studies show that people who smile are rated as more trustworthy, more competent, more likable. In courtrooms, smiling defendants receive lighter sentences. In politics, smiling candidates win more votes. In business, deals hinge on facial expressions exchanged in the first 10 seconds. One upward twitch of the lips can change the trajectory of fate. And yet, we're not always aware we're smiling. Micro smiles, fleeting, half-second twitches, leak truth from our subconscious. They betray attraction, jealousy, satisfaction. The brain processes them faster than the eye can see, storing them as impressions, gut feelings. You might not know why you distrust someone, but your brain does. It caught a flicker in their smile that didn't match their eyes. There's also a cost to forced smiles. When we wear them too long, we fracture. Service workers, expected to smile through everything, experience emotional exhaustion at alarming rates. It's called surface acting, and it rewires the brain, training it to prioritize external harmony over internal truth. Eventually, the disconnect becomes chronic. The smile becomes a mask, and the person beneath it, lost. Still, we keep smiling, because it works, because it's expected, because it buys time, peace, acceptance. In tense situations, we smile to delay escalation. In interviews, we smile to soften flaws. In awkward moments, we smile to fill silence. And in heartbreak, we sometimes smile to avoid pity. It's a social reflex coded so deep into our neurons that even babies born blind will smile when they hear their mother's voice. That's how ancient the gesture is, how essential. But what's truly unsettling is how smiles have become a social currency, a behavioral password, something we're expected to give away freely to customers, strangers, cameras, while hiding what's behind it. In this way, smiling becomes transactional, a way to pay for space in a social moment. You smile and you're allowed in. You don't, and the world recoils. That's why a frown feels like a threat, why a blank face makes us uneasy. Without a smile, the brain panics. It has no clue whether to expect love or attack. So it fills the void with anxiety, invents stories, prepares defenses. Smiles are not just nice. They're neurological treaties signed in an instant. But here's the twist. Genuine smiles, real, spontaneous, Duchenne smiles that engage both the mouth and eyes, are rare, and when they appear, we know, instinctively. Because the brain tracks symmetry, duration, muscle involvement. It knows the real thing, and when it sees it, everything changes. We trust deeper. We lean in. We let go. It's as if our DNA remembers what that gesture means. Connection without danger. Agreement without words. A micro-pact between two human beings saying, "For now, we're okay." Think of the times a smile saved you. A teacher softening a scolding with a grin. A partner diffusing a fight with a smirk. A friend flashing a smile across a room, letting you know you're not alone. These aren't just memories, they're neurological anchor points. Your brain stores them like safe houses on a map of human interaction, and you return to them again and again when the world feels sharp. So, the next time you smile, ask yourself, is it armor or invitation? Is it truth or performance? Are you offering peace or negotiating survival? Because every smile you give or receive is not just a gesture, it's a message, a contract, a silent signal passed between minds older than civilization. And whether you mean it or not, the moment it's seen, the deal is made. Yawns carry social codes. Yawning is a reflex, an automatic opening of the jaw, often accompanied by a deep inhalation. Most people think of it as a sign of tiredness or boredom. But beneath this simple gesture lies a deep, ancient code of connection, an evolutionary relic of group behavior written into our biology. It's not just a personal need for oxygen, it's a behavioral broadcast. When someone yawns, and you feel the urge to yawn too, it's not random, it's a neurological handshake, a signal that says, "I see you, I am with you, and we are aligning." This contagious effect is so consistent that it defies mere coincidence. Studies have shown that people are significantly more likely to yawn after seeing someone else do it, especially if they share an emotional bond. You might not mimic a stranger's yawn in a crowded subway, but you'll mirror a friend's yawn almost without thinking. Even just reading about yawning can make someone do it. The trigger isn't physical fatigue, it's social sensitivity. Scientists have found that contagious yawning correlates with empathy. The closer your emotional connection with someone, the more likely their yawn will trigger yours. That's why yawning becomes a quiet test of emotional resonance. It's one of the brain's background checks for social alignment. When someone in your group yawns, your mirror neuron system takes note. These neurons help us simulate the emotional states of others. If someone feels tired, your brain may simulate their tiredness too, partly to build a sense of shared reality, partly to adjust your internal state to match the group's. Yawning isn't just mimicry, it's a silent group reset button, a tool that evolution embedded in us to create subtle synchronization. In early human history, small tribes depended on each other for survival. Coordinating rest cycles and alertness could make the difference between life and death. If a few members of the group grew drowsy and started yawning, the behavior would ripple through the tribe, helping everyone get on the same page, physiologically and socially. This helped manage group cohesion. It wasn't about one person's tiredness, it was about collective rhythm. Even in animals, we see this pattern. Chimpanzees, wolves, and dogs yawn in synchrony. A dominant wolf's yawn can signal a change in group behavior, a nudge towards sleep or alertness. Domesticated dogs often mirror human yawns, especially those of their owners, revealing how deep these social reflexes go. It's not training, it's biology. Their brains are tuned to ours in ways we're only beginning to understand. There's a neurological complexity beneath the surface. When you yawn, the brain briefly increases blood flow, potentially cooling overheated neural structures. This acts like a thermal reset. But when others yawn and your body copies it without conscious intention, it's no longer about brain temperature. It's a signal that your brain is wired to sync with others, to monitor and mimic the states of nearby minds. That's not fatigue, that's group calibration. Consider a scenario. You're in a meeting and someone across the table yawns. Seconds later, another person does it. You hold yours back, feeling it rising. The room, once alert, now shifts toward fatigue, or at least signals it. But something deeper is happening. The shared yawns create a rhythm of recognition, almost like a subliminal chorus saying, "We are attuned to each other. We are one unit." Yawning in that moment becomes less about rest and more about relationship. This goes even further. Some research suggests that people on the autism spectrum, who often experience difficulty with empathy or reading social cues, are less likely to engage in contagious yawning. This isn't a flaw, it's a clue. It shows how much yawning is tied to emotional processing and social attunement. It isn't just about mimicking, it's about connecting. And then, there's the strange phenomenon of delayed yawns. You see someone yawn, and 5 or 10 seconds later, it hits you. It's like your brain needed time to catch up, to decode the social signal and decide, yes, I'm in this group, I'm part of this moment. It's subconscious, but powerful. It becomes a nonverbal handshake, a whisper between nervous systems that says, let's slow down together. Yawning as a form of social communication is subtle but persistent. It's a ghost language we all speak, often without realizing it. And once you become aware of its depth, it changes how you see these simple gestures. A yawn isn't laziness, it's not boredom. Sometimes, it's not even tiredness. It's a code, a pulse of unity, a silent nod in the language of empathy and group survival. Think about how evolution has shaped us not just as individuals, but as tribes. We are social beings. We mimic laughter, we mirror frowns, we lean in when someone else leans. Yawning is simply part of this broader toolkit. It aligns our bodies, resets our rhythms, and reminds us that we are not alone. Now consider the last time you yawned in response to someone else. Was it really about oxygen? Or was it a reflexive reach across invisible space, one nervous system quietly tapping another? Maybe in that moment, your body said something your mouth didn't. I'm here, I'm with you, let's rest, reset, and realign. And the next time you feel a yawn rising, pause for a moment. Look around. Notice who else is in sync with you. Notice the subtle chain reaction in motion. You're not just reacting to tiredness, you're echoing connection. You're part of an ancient pattern, written not in words, but in waves of breath, stretches of muscle, and silent neural mirroring. The body remembers what the mind forgets. We are wired not just to survive, but to synchronize. Laughter masks mental alarms. Laughter is supposed to mean joy, isn't it? It's what we associate with happiness, comfort, and safety. But what if I told you that laughter isn't always laughter? That sometimes it's a mask, an automatic defense the mind throws over deeper signals like fear, pain, or emotional overload. That laugh you heard at the funeral, that sudden chuckle in a moment of deep tension, that giggle after a traumatic confession. They're not always signs of amusement. Sometimes they're alarms, disguised. Psychologists have long known that laughter isn't just about humor, it's about relief. But what many people don't realize is that laughter can also emerge in situations that aren't funny at all, moments of trauma, stress, or emotional confrontation. This isn't a mistake, it's a design. The nervous system, when pushed to the edge, often fires off laughter as a pressure valve, a misdirection, a shield. You've probably seen it. A child falls, scrapes their knee, and after a brief moment of silence, starts laughing. But look closer. That laugh is shaking, uneven, almost panicked. It's the body trying to process something it doesn't understand. Not comedy, not joy, shock. The same happens in adults. A man gets bad news, really bad, and suddenly starts laughing uncontrollably. He doesn't mean to. It just happens. Because the truth was too much, too fast, and his brain didn't have another escape route. This phenomenon has a name, nervous laughter. But that term doesn't do it justice. It sounds like a mild glitch. But it's not. It's a full-on emotional override. When the amygdala, our fear center, lights up, and the logical brain shuts down, the body has limited options: fight, flight, freeze, or laugh. Laughing, in this context, is like the emergency protocol your brain never told you about. It hijacks the social machinery to keep you functioning, even if what's happening inside is far from okay. There's a reason soldiers returning from war zones sometimes laugh while recounting horrific experiences. It's not because they're insensitive, it's because the mind, flooded with adrenaline, trauma, and emotion, reaches for laughter like a flotation device. It's involuntary. It's primal. Laughter in that moment isn't about comedy. It's about control. Control over breakdown, over dissociation, over spiraling into helplessness. Even in therapy, this happens. People will laugh mid-sentence as they reveal something they've never told another soul. I know it sounds crazy, they say with a chuckle. This is so weird, they smile, trying to brush it off. But the therapist knows that laughter isn't dismissal. It's a flare, A sign the truth is cutting close to the bone. Comedians know this too. The best stand-up performers don't just tell jokes, they tell truths that are uncomfortable. Laughter becomes the socially acceptable release valve for hearing something raw, something honest. You laugh not because it's silly, but because it's terrifyingly real. The joke is a disguise, the laughter is the proof. In social settings, laughter is often a deflection. You're asked a personal question you don't want to answer, so you laugh it off. Someone points out a flaw, and you joke about it before they can dig deeper. Laughter becomes armor. It says, don't look too closely, don't take me too seriously, I'm fine. But you're not. You're protecting something, hiding the alarm bell behind a laugh track. The body's systems aren't always logical, they're adaptive. Evolution built us to survive, not to make perfect sense. And if laughter helped keep the group together, helped de-escalate danger, helped reset the emotional tone after a predator sighting, then the body learned. Laughter equals safety, even if the context was dire. We've seen this in hostage videos, people laughing when under obvious stress, or in courtrooms when defendants smile at horrific accusations. It's not smugness. Often, it's terror. And the body, unable to process shame, fear, or guilt, reaches for the most human reaction it can find: laughter. We even teach children to laugh at discomfort, to laugh when bullied, to laugh when scared, to lighten up, take a joke. Don't be so serious. Over time, laughter becomes a habit, a programmed reflex that runs every time the emotional temperature rises, even if what's boiling underneath is panic. This doesn't mean laughter is fake, or that it can't be real joy. Of course it can. But when it shows up in strange places, in pain, in grief, in confrontation, it's worth pausing. Because that laugh may be the only sign that someone's trying not to fall apart. Think back. Have you ever laughed during a moment you should have cried? Or made a joke to escape something you weren't ready to feel? Have you ever burst into giggles in a situation so tense it felt surreal? That was your nervous system pulling a sleight of hand. It couldn't shut down the alarm, so it masked it. And here's the haunting part. Many of us never realize we're doing it. Because laughter is socially acceptable. It doesn't trigger concern. You're not asked, "Are you okay?" when you laugh. You're applauded, encouraged. "You're so strong," they say, still smiling through it all. But they don't see that the smile isn't a badge of strength. It's a shield. It's the last thing holding you together. Laughter masks mental alarms. It's not deception, it's adaptation. When your brain can't fight the truth, it dances around it. When pain is too close, the body throws confetti. It's tragic, brilliant, and deeply human. So the next time you see someone laugh in a moment that doesn't make sense, ask yourself, what are they really feeling underneath? And when you catch yourself laughing while your heart is racing and your breath is shallow, pause. That laugh might not be joy. It might be your soul whispering for help in the only language the world will still accept. Because behind the laughter, there might be an untold story, a hidden wound, a truth too heavy for silence. Hoarding is legacy memory. You're standing in a cluttered room, maybe your own, maybe a loved one's. Stacks of magazines from decades past. Rusted tools no one's used in years. Boxes filled with cables, trinkets, receipts, cracked electronics, mismatched socks. Junk, most would say. Worthless. But what if I told you it's not just clutter, it's memory? Not personal memory, but ancient ancestral memory etched into your instincts. The urge to hoard isn't about laziness or mess. It's not always a disorder. Sometimes it's legacy. Scarcity written into your genes. Ghosts of hunger carried forward by blood. Hoarding is older than civilization. In nature, animals stockpile out of necessity. Squirrels hide nuts. Birds line nests with glittering scraps. Rats remember mazes to find forgotten stashes. But humans hoard meaning, emotion, possibility. We collect not just what we need, but what we fear we might need, someday, somehow. This fear doesn't come from nowhere. For most of history, survival meant storing, saving, scraping by. Our ancestors endured winters without food, droughts without water, generations marked by famine, war, plague. In that world, waste meant death, and anything could be valuable tomorrow. A rusted nail, a torn coat, a broken piece of wood. These weren't garbage. They were lifelines waiting for the moment they'd matter. And so the instinct grew, to keep, to hold, to guard against the unknown. That instinct didn't vanish when supermarkets appeared or when homes grew bigger. It just went quiet, buried beneath the illusion of abundance. But illusion doesn't erase history. It only dims it. And in some people, that instinct whispers louder. Maybe you felt it, the hesitation to throw something away. Not because you use it, but because it feels wrong to let it go. A jacket that no longer fits. A charger for a phone you no longer own. A childhood toy you haven't touched in 20 years. Somewhere inside, your brain says, what if? What if I need this? What if I regret it? What if this is the last one? And that voice isn't irrational, it's inherited. Scientists have found that trauma leaves marks not just in minds, but in genes. Epigenetic changes can echo across generations. If your great-grandmother survived a famine, your body may still carry traces of her experience. Lower serotonin, heightened cortisol, an internal clock tuned to anxiety. Her fear of loss becomes your fear of letting go. But hoarding isn't always fear. Sometimes it's identity. Each object is a breadcrumb back to a time, a person, a feeling. A broken watch isn't just metal. It's your father's hands. A worn-out t-shirt isn't just cloth. It's the last day you felt like yourself. In a world moving too fast, stuff becomes anchors. Memory, preserved in plastic and paper, and there's a reason letting go feels like grief. It is grief. Every discarded item is a small funeral. Every trash bag is a chapter closed. And not everyone is ready to close those chapters, because some people weren't allowed to say goodbye when it mattered most. Now step into the home of a hoarder, not with judgment, but with empathy. See the rooms not as trash heaps, but as sanctuaries, time capsules, echoes of lives interrupted. Maybe that mountain of newspaper is someone's way of never forgetting the day their mother died. Maybe those boxes of wires are someone's quiet rebellion against the world that told them they'd never have enough. That doesn't mean hoarding isn't harmful. It can overwhelm, isolate, consume, but understanding its root changes how we heal it. You don't treat ancestral fear with shame. You treat it with safety, with patience, with the promise that tomorrow will have enough. Even minimalists aren't immune. Their emptiness is often curated, a clean slate to escape noise. But even that is a relationship with scarcity, a different response to the same ancestral alarm. One clings to matter, the other clings to absence, but both come from the same place, the need to feel in control. So if you're surrounded by things you can't let go of, ask not just why, but who. Who are you carrying? Whose fear are you holding? What story is your clutter trying to finish? Because hoarding isn't madness, it's memory. A survival instinct dressed in modern clothes. A cry from the past that says, keep this. You might need it when the world turns cold again. And maybe, just maybe, honoring that cry starts with listening. Apologies as peace tokens. Imagine someone says, I'm sorry, but their face stays still. No shame, no softness, just the phrase, like a key clicking into a lock. You feel something unlock inside you anyway. You ease up. You nod. You move on. Not because they meant it, but because the code was recognized. Apologies aren't always vessels of remorse. Sometimes, they're just peace tokens. Words spoken not to express emotion, but to restore order. A behavioral handshake. A ceasefire. This is the unsettling truth behind the phrase, I'm sorry. It doesn't always come from guilt. Sometimes, it's a strategic gesture, a social encryption key. Anthropologists and psychologists have long studied apologies, not just as emotional expressions, but as ritualistic behaviors. Across cultures, sorry works like an incantation. It signals submission, a willingness to restore harmony. Even if the person doesn't feel bad, saying sorry lowers the perceived threat level. It tells the group, I know the rules, I still belong. This works because the brain is wired for group survival. Social rejection once meant death, so our nervous systems are hypersensitive to interpersonal conflict. Apologies, whether genuine or not, calm those nerves. They pacify others. They activate trust centers in the brain. A 2014 study found that even fake apologies can reduce anger and lower cortisol levels. The biology doesn't wait to verify sincerity. It responds to the code. Think about moments in your own life where someone apologized, but you knew they didn't mean it. Maybe it was a coworker after a passive-aggressive email, a partner who said the words with no change in behavior, a stranger brushing past you with a dry, "sorry." Did you forgive them anyway? Did you let it go? It's because the ritual still worked. Now flip it. Think of a time you said sorry without feeling guilty. Maybe you apologized just to move the conversation along, to avoid awkwardness, to prevent escalation. You weren't confessing. You were disarming. You were offering a peace token, not an emotion. This is how apologies function as encryption keys. They signal alignment to unspoken social rules. Not necessarily truth. Not necessarily regret. Just an agreement to drop the weapons. It's why children are taught to say sorry before they understand why. We train the behavior long before the emotion. And because society values the script more than the feeling. And here's the deeper twist. Humans can detect insincerity, but we often choose not to challenge it, because exposing a fake apology reintroduces conflict. So, we accept the token, we decode it, we let the system continue running smoothly. This system, though efficient, has a dark side. When sorry becomes a shield, it allows harm to repeat. It resets relationships without requiring repair. It creates illusion over resolution. It teaches people that words matter more than action. That conflict can be bypassed, not resolved. And yet, it's also what keeps civilizations intact. Because full emotional honesty isn't always possible. We can't all pause to process guilt, shame, or reflection in real time. The world moves too fast. So instead, we exchange these little verbal currencies. We trade sorry for safety. We accept the gesture instead of the truth. Sometimes, that's enough. Sometimes, peace matters more than depth, but not always. Because when real hurt is glossed over with empty words, something corrodes, trust weakens, intimacy dies. Not because the apology was absent, but because it was hollow. The encryption key was used, but it didn't unlock anything real. So what do? We listen differently. We stop treating apologies as automatic passes. We start noticing the tone, the eyes, the action that follows. We recognize when sorry is used as a shortcut, and when it's a genuine path toward healing. And most importantly, we remember that just because the code was entered, doesn't mean we have to accept it. Not every key fits the lock. Not every sorry brings peace. Sometimes, true healing begins where the ritual ends, and honesty begins. Avoidance as survival encryption. You think you're lazy, that you lack willpower, discipline, backbone, but maybe you've misunderstood your own wiring. Because what we call procrastination, ghosting, emotional withdrawal might not be flaws. They might be encrypted survival codes, passed down by ancestors who learned that sometimes to disappear was the only way to live. Avoidance isn't weakness, it's camouflage. Look at nature. The chameleon doesn't fight its predator, it vanishes. The possum doesn't confront its attacker, it plays dead. For millions of years, survival wasn't about confrontation. It was about strategic absence, and humans, shaped by the same brutal algorithms of evolution, learned a similar trick. Disappear when danger rises. Evade, deflect, vanish. But modern danger isn't just physical. It's emotional, social, psychological. A job interview, a conflict with a friend, an unread message. These are not tigers in the grass, but the brain treats them like they are. It feels the cortisol spike. It hears the ancestral drumbeat of danger, and it chooses the safest move, retreat. You delay sending the email, you avoid answering the call, you disappear from the chat, from the plan, from the relationship, not because you don't care, but because your body flinched before your mind understood. It's not laziness, it's legacy. Your nervous system encrypted a response millions of years ago. If it feels like a trap, don't engage. And here's the twist. It worked. The people who paused, who froze, who slipped into the shadows, they lived. They passed on their DNA. And now, generations later, you sit with an inbox full of unread messages and a stomach full of guilt, wondering why you can't just do the thing. The answer? Because doing the thing sometimes feels like walking into fire. Avoidance is intelligent. It's pattern recognition. The brain scans the past, every rejection, every punishment, every failure, and compiles a risk profile. If the pattern fits, the body acts. That's why you hesitate before opening bad news, why you put off making hard decisions, why you disappear from people you love. It's not that you don't care, it's that you care so much, the stakes feel fatal. And in a way, they are. Not physically maybe, but emotionally. Social rejection triggers the same pain circuits as physical harm. Your brain doesn't distinguish between a slap and a cold shoulder. So when you procrastinate, ghost, or withdraw, you're not avoiding the task, you're avoiding the imagined wound. But this encryption has a cost. Avoidance, once a tool for survival, becomes a cage. The more you use it, the more your brain confirms it works. You avoid the task, feel a short-term relief, and your body says, "Good job, we're safe." And so you do it again and again, until the habit becomes identity. I'm just a procrastinator. I'm bad at confrontation. I vanish when things get hard. But those aren't traits, they're scars, strategies, echoes of ancient wisdom misapplied to a modern world. Still, they're real, valid. They were born of something honest, that ache in your chest when your phone rings, that dread when someone asks, "Can we talk?" That fatigue when your to-do list grows faster than your energy. These are not failures of character. They are encrypted signals, written in the language of fear, protection, survival. So what do? First, decode the encryption. Ask not, "Why am I avoiding this?" but "What pain am I trying to prevent?" Often it's not the task, it's the emotion buried beneath it. Shame, rejection, failure, unworthiness. Your brain isn't lazy, it's shielding you. Second, change the pattern gently. Don't rip the avoidance out. It's a defense, not a defect. Instead, soften the danger. Make the stakes smaller. Open one message, not all. Do 5 minutes of the task, not the whole thing. Reply to one person, not the entire thread. Prove to your brain that action doesn't equal danger, that presence doesn't mean pain. Third, forgive yourself. Avoidance isn't moral, it's not good or bad, it's adaptive. And like any adaptation, it becomes obsolete in the wrong context. You're not broken, you're just running code that's out of date. The truth is, you come from a long line of survivors. People who slipped through nets, dodged conflict, stayed silent to stay safe. Their instincts live in your bones. They shaped you, protected you. And now, as you face your own battles, not with swords, but with silence, you carry that inheritance. But you also have the power to rewrite it, because sometimes the new survival tactic is showing up. Repetition builds internal safety. Why do we return to the same songs, the same shows, the same familiar words repeated like a soft incantation? Not because we've run out of new things, not because the world is empty of stories, but because repetition, gentle, predictable, and known, builds an inner scaffolding of safety. A signal from the brain to the body that says, "You've been here before. Nothing bad happened. Stay a little longer." This isn't laziness or escapism, it's survival. Deep inside us is an ancient neural network designed to detect patterns. And every time we choose the familiar over the unknown, we're lighting up that system's reward circuit. When the world feels chaotic or unpredictable, our nervous system craves consistency. It seeks control in the places where control is possible. A song you've played 100 times becomes a lighthouse in the storm. A show you've memorized becomes a refuge in the noise. Children instinctively understand this. A toddler watching the same movie for the 50th time isn't just being stubborn, they're regulating. They're building emotional predictability. Each scene is a landmark in a map they already know how to navigate. There are no surprises, no threats, just the steady rhythm of expectation met, again and again. This isn't a quirk of childhood. It continues in adults too. That moment when you hit repeat on a track, not because you want to hear it again, but because you need to. Because that melody has already proven itself safe, familiar, grounding. Your body isn't asking for entertainment. It's asking for shelter. You see, the brain's primary job isn't to think. It's to predict, to keep you alive, to scan for danger and mark what is safe. So, when something has been encountered multiple times without harm, your brain bookmarks it, files it under trustworthy. Every repeated exposure reinforces that file, makes it thicker, stronger, more reliable. And so, a song becomes a blanket. A show becomes a ritual. A phrase becomes a prayer. This is why people in grief often watch comforting sitcoms. It's why someone with anxiety might reread the same book every year. It's why, when life falls apart, we turn to things we already know. Because repetition doesn't just reinforce memory, it stabilizes identity. It builds a structure inside chaos, a small sanctuary of control where none exists elsewhere. Even the brain's default mode network, the part that activates during rest and reflection, responds to these loops. Studies show that repeated narratives help the brain rehearse emotional regulation. The more often you hear the same story, the more efficiently your brain processes it. The peaks and valleys become expected. The nervous system doesn't brace for impact. It already knows the outcome, and knowing the outcome means letting go of fear. Think about that for a moment. When you know what's coming, your body relaxes, your heartbeat slows, your mind stops scanning for threats. In a world that constantly changes, repetition becomes a doorway into stillness, into presence, into calm. But this habit isn't just about internal peace. It's also a form of unconscious self-parenting. When you were young, someone may have read you the same bedtime story every night, or tucked you in with the same lullaby. Over time, those sounds became symbols, not just of the story, but of safety. Repeating them now, as an adult, is like whispering to your nervous system, you're not alone, you're home. This is why we don't always need novelty. The pressure to always consume the new, to always be updated, often comes from outside, from algorithms, from trends, from the fear of missing out. But your body doesn't care about novelty, it cares about survival. And survival doesn't always mean fight or flight. Sometimes it means rest. Repetition is one of the few ways the body gets permission to rest. Even rituals, religious, cultural, personal, are rooted in this same principle. Repetition creates meaning through familiarity. A repeated chant becomes sacred. A daily walk becomes a meditation. A song played each morning becomes an anchor in time. These aren't just habits, they're neural pacifiers, emotional stabilizers, quiet messages that say, you've done this before, you made it through, you're safe here. There's even a name for this comfort effect in psychology, the mere exposure effect. The more we're exposed to something, the more we tend to like it. Even if it didn't move us at first, repeated exposure warms it to us. Not because the thing changes, but because we do. We associate it with survival, with familiarity, with the absence of danger. So, the next time you find yourself replaying that song again, or watching that show you've seen a dozen times, don't shame yourself. Don't call it a guilty pleasure. Recognize it for what it really is, a reset, a self-soothing loop, a psychological shelter constructed from memory, sound, and expectation. And if you ever feel ashamed for sticking to what's familiar, remember, the brain's deepest need isn't novelty, it's safety. And in a world that demands constant movement, repetition becomes resistance. It becomes healing. It becomes home. Cleaning triggers, control, reboot. Why do we clean when we're anxious? Why do we suddenly decide to reorganize shelves, scrub the bathroom floor, or rearrange the desk right after a breakup, bad news, or overwhelming fear? It's not just about hygiene. It's not about aesthetics. It's about rebooting control. When the world outside spirals into unpredictability, the human brain reaches for anchors, patterns, rituals, predictable systems where input creates output, where effort is rewarded by result, where the chaos of emotion can be temporarily silenced by the soft rhythm of order. Cleaning is one of the oldest psychological defense mechanisms because it's physical, immediate, and symbolically pure. You touch disorder and make it disappear. It may start with something small, a cluttered table, a dirty dish, a pile of clothes you've ignored for weeks. Then something snaps. A fight, a memory, a wave of dread. And suddenly, you're on your knees with a sponge, wiping corners you haven't touched in months. You call it productive. But deep down, it's survival. You're not just cleaning. You're asserting control over something, anything, when the rest of your life feels untouchable. Psychologists call this displacement activity. When we can't solve the real problem, when the threat is emotional, abstract, or too large to fix, we redirect our energy into tasks we can manage. And cleaning is perfect for that. Every sweep of a broom, every click of a drawer closing, every folded shirt is a small declaration. I am not powerless. In grief, people often report compulsive cleaning. After loss, the body floods with cortisol, confusion, and helplessness. But the mind rebels. It says, if I can't undo death, I can undo dust. If I can't fix what was taken, I can fix what's messy. The pain doesn't vanish, but it gets rerouted through ritual, through soap, through symmetry. Even spiritual traditions understood this. Monks who sweep temple floors every morning, nuns who polish wooden pews as part of their devotion. The act of cleaning becomes prayer, meditation, focus. It narrows the chaos of existence into something solvable. You begin, you persist, you complete. That clarity is addictive when everything else feels murky. In modern homes, people with anxiety often report a powerful compulsion to tidy up, not because they want to, but because it's the only thing that stops their thoughts from unraveling. The dish isn't just a dish, it's a battlefield. The laundry isn't just fabric, it's a fortress wall against panic. Cleaning gives your body something to do while your mind fights to stay intact. You'll see this pattern in those recovering from trauma, victims of abuse who maintain pristine homes, people with PTSD who arrange items with mathematical precision. It's not about obsessiveness, it's about safety. Each object in its place is a statement. This world obeys my laws now. No one else decides the terms. Even in pop culture, you'll notice this trope. The character who cleans furiously right before a breakdown. The detective who reorganizes a crime scene board to soothe rage. The widow who can't stop scrubbing a sink that's already clean. These aren't dramatizations. They're reflections of real neurological loops. Because for many people, cleanliness becomes a way to simulate sanity when internal order is gone. The act of cleaning also impacts the brain chemically. Completing a task releases dopamine. Order reduces cognitive load. A clean space limits sensory overload, reduces visual stress, and restores a sense of orientation. You know where things are, you know what's been handled, and that knowing becomes a substitute for confidence, a quiet reassurance. I'm okay. I'm in charge. I still have influence. But there's a darker side to this too. Sometimes, the cleaning never stops. Sometimes, the pursuit of order becomes its own form of chaos. You can scrub until your hands bleed and still feel unsafe, because the mess wasn't outside, it was inside. And no amount of polished glass or vacuum lines can erase grief, or fear, or memory. Yet, we still do it, again and again. Because for a moment, just a moment, the noise goes quiet. The rage softens. The helplessness recedes. And you can breathe. Surrounded by clean counters, aligned books, sanitized spaces, you feel like maybe, just maybe, the world is manageable again. Children instinctively mimic this too. They clean up their toys after being yelled at. They organize their room after crying. It's not about obedience, it's about regulating the storm. Even in miniature, the human brain uses physical space as an emotional mirror. So the next time you find yourself deep cleaning out of nowhere, pay attention. Ask yourself, what emotion did I just avoid? What feeling tried to surface? Because that vacuum cleaner may not just be sucking up crumbs, it might be sucking up sorrow. That rag isn't just wiping dirt, it's wiping fear. The sponge doesn't just scrub the counter, it scrubs the ache of not knowing what comes next. Cleaning isn't trivial, it's not always mundane. In the hands of a mind that feels cornered, it becomes a lifeline, a simulated ritual of clarity in a fog of uncertainty. A way to reboot the illusion of control when reality refuses to cooperate. So, if you ever see someone cleaning furiously after a collapse, don't laugh. Don't say, relax, it's fine. Because to them, it's not just about tidying up. It's about stitching themselves back together, one folded towel at a time. Overthinking is risk simulation. You're lying in bed. The lights are off, the room is still, and the world outside has quieted. But your mind? It's racing. Thoughts spiraling in every direction. What if I said the wrong thing earlier? What if tomorrow goes wrong? What if I fail? What if they never forgive me? You toss, turn, replay conversations, invent outcomes, run mental marathons that leave you exhausted, but still standing in the same place. This isn't just anxiety. This is risk simulation. Overthinking feels like a trap. It feels like drowning in possibilities, but beneath the discomfort, there's something ancient, something engineered. Your brain isn't malfunctioning, it's training, preparing. running disaster drills in the hope that if the worst happens, you'll survive. The human brain evolved not just to perceive danger, but to predict it. In the wild, survival belonged to those who could anticipate the lion behind the grass, the betrayal behind the smile, the storm behind the silence. Our ancestors who thought ahead, who imagined every terrible possibility, lived longer, passed on their genes, and those genes built your mind. So, when you lie awake overthinking, it's not just worry, it's simulation. Your brain creates mental models, then war games them. What if this happens? What would I do? It loops these scenarios, not to torture you, but to build familiarity, to inoculate you against the shock of disaster. It believes that if it can feel the worst before it arrives, it won't hurt as much when it does. But here's the paradox. Most of those imagined disasters never happen. The conversation doesn't go sideways, the meeting doesn't implode, the friend isn't upset, and yet the brain keeps simulating. Why? Because evolution doesn't reward accuracy. It rewards caution. It's better to imagine 1,000 false threats than to miss the one that kills you. So, the overthinking mind doesn't seek peace, it seeks safety. And in today's world, where most dangers are emotional, social, or imagined, that simulation engine has no off switch. You're no longer dodging predators in the jungle. You're dodging failure, embarrassment, rejection. But the brain treats them the same. It floods your system with cortisol, triggers ancient fight or flight responses, and builds elaborate mental scenarios, like a storm chamber testing every possible collapse. You think you're being thorough, but what you're really doing is bracing for a ghost. Take this in. Studies show that people who overthink often score high in verbal intelligence. They have rich inner worlds, complex thinking patterns, and strong narrative imagination. The same brain that writes brilliant stories or solves layered problems is also the one that writes catastrophic futures at 2 a.m. It's not broken. It's just too good at simulation. But the illusion of productivity is the trap. Overthinking feels like action. You feel like you're preparing, analyzing, making progress, but in reality, you're stuck in the loop. The same thoughts, same worries, same outcomes, no forward movement. Because overthinking is rehearsal, not resolution. So, what can you do? First, recognize it for what it is, a safety instinct turned up too high. You wouldn't yell at your smoke alarm for going off. You'd check the batteries, adjust the settings, treat your thoughts the same, gently, curiously. Ask, is this scenario likely? Is it helpful? Have I thought this already? Second, anchor to the present. The mind spirals into futures because it fears uncertainty, but the present is stable, real. If you can't control tomorrow, control what's in front of you. Your breath, your posture, your voice, your choice in this second. And third, give your brain closure. It doesn't need perfection, it needs permission to pause. Write the thought down, say it out loud. Finish the sentence, let the mental simulation run its course, then gently shut the door. Because the truth is this. Your overthinking is trying to protect you. It's your brain's flawed, beautiful way of saying, I care about what happens next. But protection without peace becomes prison. So, the next time your thoughts spiral, don't curse them. Don't fight them. See the storm for what it is. A drill, not a disaster. A rehearsal, not a prophecy. And remind yourself, you've survived every imagined ending so far. Not because you predicted them all, but because you lived, chose, and adapted when it mattered most. And in the end, that's not overthinking, that's resilience. Fixation hides unresolved codes. You think you're fixated on them, the person you can't stop thinking about, the job you didn't get, the message you keep rereading. You think it's about them, but it's not. Obsession is rarely about the object. It's about the unfinished code running in your mind, begging to complete its loop. Fixation is a signal, a flare fired by your subconscious to draw attention to something unresolved. It's not about attraction, desire, or even justice. It's about completion. Your brain is wired to seek closure. When something breaks that flow, when a pattern begins but doesn't finish, it lingers in the background like an open tab you forgot to close. And the longer it stays, the more it loops. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. It's why you remember interrupted tasks better than completed ones. The mind doesn't like loose threads. It wants to tie them off. When you get ghosted, when a friendship ends without explanation, when someone doesn't respond the way you expected, that loop stays open, and that loop becomes obsession. Not because the person mattered more, but because your mind didn't finish the script. Think of fixation as your mind's attempt at editing a moment. You keep replaying scenes not to relive them, but to rewrite them. Maybe in the replays, you say what you didn't say. Maybe they understand you. Maybe it ends differently. That compulsion isn't weakness. It's an unfinished neural circuit. A psychological version of to be continued. And here's the paradox. The more you revisit it, the more tangled it becomes. You pour emotional energy into the past, hoping it will yield clarity. But memory is not a clean file. It's a live program that rewrites itself every time you access it. Your obsession doesn't bring you closer to the truth. It pushes you deeper into a maze of imagined resolutions. This is why some obsessions feel so irrational, why you can't explain why someone lingers in your head, even if you barely knew them, or why a rejection from years ago still haunts you. It's not about them. It's about what they triggered. They became the surface symbol for a deeper code: abandonment, inadequacy, loss, confusion. You're not trying to reach the person. You're trying to solve the emotion they awoke. Fixation, in this sense, is emotional recursion. The system gets stuck because the script lacks an endpoint, and so you spin, you fantasize, you daydream, you replay texts, moments, conversations, not to understand them, but to end them. You hope that one more loop will bring peace, but here's the truth. It won't. Because closure is rarely something the other person can give. It's not in their apology, not in their explanation, not in their return. It's in your willingness to step out of the loop and see what's really underneath. What pattern is trying to finish? What emotion hasn't been fully felt? What moment in your past is echoing through this present? Until you answer those questions, the mind will keep attaching new faces to old codes, new obsessions for old wounds, and you'll mistake the messenger for the message. But when you recognize the fixation as a symptom, not a desire, not a fate, but a symptom, you can start to detach. You can thank the feeling for trying to protect you. You can trace the thread back to the origin. And only then can you finish the story yourself. Because the moment you do, the loop ends. The obsession fades, and you'll realize what haunted you wasn't the person. It was the unfinished emotion they awakened. And now, finally, it's complete. Staring is claim behavior. You felt it before. That moment when someone locks eyes with you. Too long, too direct, too still. And suddenly your pulse rises, your body stiffens, your mind floods with questions. Why are they staring? What do they want? Should I look away or stare back? This isn't just awkwardness. This is biological protocol. Because a stare isn't just a glance held too long. It's an ancient signal, an unconscious territorial claim. And deep in your species' brainstem, the code it triggers is centuries old. This space, this presence, this interaction is mine now. In the wild, eye contact is never neutral. Among animals, direct staring is a threat, a challenge, a declaration of rank. Wolves will stare down rivals before attacking. Gorillas will beat their chests, eyes fixed, warning trespassers to back down. Even domesticated cats will fixate on one another silently before a fight erupts. And humans? We've evolved, but the matrix is still wired in. To stare too long is to provoke. To be stared at too long is to be evaluated, assessed, sized up. It's dominance versus submission, encoded in milliseconds. That's why we flinch when strangers stare at us in public. That's why we feel uncomfortable on crowded subways, or in rooms where eyes linger and words don't follow. The social surface might be polite, but underneath, something primal is unfolding. When someone stares, they're not always conscious of it, but their brain is calculating, assessing threat, interest, opportunity, power. And your brain, equally ancient, is calculating too. Should I yield? Should I assert? Should I escape? It's not about logic. It's about instinct. And in social hierarchies, staring has always been a tool. Kings and generals used it to assert control without words. In debates, the one who holds eye contact longest often appears more confident, even when they're bluffing. In relationships, eye contact builds intimacy, but hold it too long, and it becomes a claim, a possession, a burn mark of interest or threat. It's even more complex when power dynamics are uneven. When a boss stares, it can feel like surveillance. When a stranger stares across the bar, it can feel like a trap or a proposition. In romantic contexts, we often mistake prolonged eye contact for connection. But what if it's not affection? What if it's conquest? Because here's the truth. Staring is rarely just curiosity. It's more often control, a way of saying, I see you, and I'm not looking away until you respond. And that response, it's everything. Do you look down? You've ceded power. Do you look back? Now it's a duel. The gaze becomes a tug of war across invisible ground, and in digital life, it gets even stranger. Video calls, online avatars, profile pictures. Your brain still reacts to simulated eye contact. A picture of someone staring can feel intense. A webcam glance can provoke anxiety. The same ancient circuits flare up, even when no real threat exists. Because your brain doesn't need actual danger, it only needs the signal. That's why we're trained, from childhood, to make eye contact during conversation. To be respectful. To be confident. But what they don't teach is how fragile that line is. How quickly respect becomes aggression. How easily interest becomes intrusion. Even babies recognize this. Infants, only weeks old, will respond differently to direct gazes versus averted eyes. A stare feels charged, alive. It's not just another face, it's a command. Pay attention. I'm watching. You're on stage, and when you stare back, you're not just returning the look, you're joining the ritual, you're accepting the challenge. This isn't politeness, it's a psychic duel, a quiet contest happening in the space between two pupils. But not all stares are hostile. Some are desperate, pleading, a way to reach through silence and scream without speaking. Prisoners stare through bars to remember freedom. Lovers stare to imprint memory. Mothers stare into newborn eyes to bind something unspoken. The same biological signal, claim, is used to say, you matter to me, you're mine, sometimes softly, sometimes violently. So the next time someone stares at you, remember this. Your body isn't overreacting. It's decoding, running scripts from 100 generations ago, reading tone, context, posture, power, and deciding how to respond. Because in the end, a stare isn't just a look, it's a move. And in the social chessboard of life, every move counts. Gaming escapes identity feedback. There's a moment just after the game loads and before real life reasserts itself, when something strange happens. The world fades, the self softens. You're no longer the person with a name, with responsibilities, with that endless inner narration saying, this is who I am. In those few hours, gaming doesn't just entertain, it dissolves identity. It severs the exhausting loop of being yourself. Because that's what most people don't understand about escapism. It isn't about running from reality, it's about relief from maintenance. The constant feedback loop of identity is loud. Every second, your brain reaffirms who you are, what you like, what you should be doing, what others expect from you. It's a constant construction, a performance stitched together by memory, emotion, and social code. And it's exhausting. But when you play a game, that loop goes quiet. In the virtual world, you don't have to be anyone, unless you choose to. You can be a masked warrior, a stealthy hacker, a starship pilot, a god, or nothing at all. And your brain, relieved of the burden of self-definition, finally exhales. For a moment, it forgets your past. It stops anticipating your future. You're just here, responding to input. And no solving puzzles, navigating fictional physics. It becomes a kind of meditation. One where your sense of self thins out until only instinct remains. This is why games are more than leisure. They are psychological thresholds. They provide temporary amnesia from the self, not in a destructive way, but in a healing one. In games, failure isn't identity damaging. Dying isn't personal. Repeating a level isn't shameful. It's a loop, not a judgment. You try again. Not because you failed as a person, but because the rules of this world are different. You're free to attempt without consequence to your self-worth. Compare that to real life, where every misstep feels like a permanent stain on your identity, where every choice either reinforces or erodes the fragile mask you wear. You're not allowed to just try things and fail. But in games, that pressure disappears. You act, you adapt, you respawn. No guilt, no self-loathing, just data. just play. And then there's the beauty of choice without identity bias. In life, you might hesitate to make bold decisions because they conflict with the version of you that others know. But in games, those chains fall away. You can explore the darkest morality or the highest heroism. You can build a peaceful farm or burn empires to the ground. And it doesn't define you, it liberates you. Because finally, you're operating outside the exhausting mirror of other people's perceptions. Even in multiplayer worlds where other humans exist, the social roles shift. You're not defined by your past, just by your skill, your cooperation, your strategy. It's not you who's being judged. It's your in-game avatar, your tactic, your timing. And often, for the first time in days, weeks, months, you feel free. Because you've slipped the loop. Neuroscience supports this. fMRI scans show that during immersive gaming, parts of the brain responsible for autobiographical thinking, your sense of self, decrease in activity. Instead, areas responsible for immediate attention and sensory processing light up. You become present, not as yourself, but as action in motion, consciousness without burden, existence without narrative. It's no surprise then that people battling depression or anxiety often find solace in games, not because games numb them, but because games offer containment. The chaotic, endless rumination that usually governs their identity gets replaced with structure, with feedback that's clear, rules that make sense, rewards that are immediate, and perhaps most importantly, failure that doesn't sting. You see, real life punishes failure socially and emotionally, but games expect it. Games teach you to fail forward, to adapt, to experiment. The game doesn't care if you tried the wrong path. It just reloads and lets you try again. No shame, no loss of dignity. Just learning. And there's something holy in that kind of space. Because in this reset, this break from identity feedback, we get to remember who we are without the weight of constantly having to be someone. We get to feel what it's like to exist without defending a story, without holding a posture, without performing. Some will call it escapism. But escapism is not a crime when the prison is chronic self-surveillance, when the guard is your own inner voice demanding consistency. Games give you the power to leave the prison, not forever, but long enough to rest, to recover, to remember that you are more than your labels, more than your history, more than your assigned role. And when you log off, maybe you come back with something new, a different insight, a reset nervous system, a calmer breath. Or maybe just the knowledge that it's okay to let go sometimes, that you don't always have to be you. That play can be sanctuary, and that losing yourself can be the most honest thing you do all day. So, the next time someone says games are a waste of time or just a distraction, ask them this. From what are we distracting ourselves? And what if the answer is our own exhausting echo? Cravings are memory pings. Why do you suddenly crave pickles at 2 a.m. or peanut butter on toast when you're not even hungry? Why does the scent of cinnamon stop you cold in a grocery aisle, making you feel something, remember something, without knowing why? These aren't random urges, they're memory pings. Neural signals wrapped in flavor, trying to pull you backward into a forgotten scene. Because sometimes, cravings aren't about food at all. They're about time travel. The human brain stores memories in complex, fragmented ways. We don't remember life like a movie. We remember it in pieces. A color, a laugh, a sound, a scent, and most powerfully, a taste. Taste, out of all senses, is the most direct path to the brain's emotional core. The olfactory bulb, the scent processor, is directly wired to the limbic system, where emotion and memory live. When you crave a strange, specific food, your body isn't asking for calories. It's asking for access. Access to something buried. You might feel a sudden craving for strawberry milk, even though you haven't had it in years. But what your mind is really chasing might be the memory of summer camp, sitting on the grass, laughing with someone whose name you forgot. Or it might be safety, because your mother gave you that when you were scared. The taste isn't the goal, it's the key. Cravings often appear in moments of stress, loneliness, or transition. Not because your body is malnourished, but because your brain is searching for emotional grounding. It reaches into the archive, looks for moments of comfort, belonging, or identity, and triggers a hunger signal associated with them. You think you're hungry, but you're actually nostalgic. You want something back, not something edible. Psychologists call this episodic memory activation, the idea that sense cues, especially taste and smell, can unlock entire memory webs without our conscious awareness. And here's the twist. Sometimes, the brain doesn't show you the memory at all. It just gives you the craving, the echo, the emotional frequency without the source. You're left chasing a food you don't even like anymore because your neural map says, this used to matter. This meant something. Children form these imprints early. The cereal you begged for wasn't just sugar. It was the cartoon you watched, the Saturday mornings, the way the light came through the blinds. Decades later, one glance at that box, one whiff of that artificial flavor, and your brain rings like a bell. But not always with joy. Sometimes, cravings point toward pain. There are cases where trauma survivors develop cravings for foods they ate during abuse, not because they enjoyed them, but because their brain fused that taste with survival. In extreme stress, the mind will bond with whatever sensory information is available, smells, textures, flavors, marking them as anchors. And later, those same signals return, in cravings. You might crave spaghetti not because it's delicious, but because it was the only thing your dad knew how to cook after your parents split. You might want lemonade, not for its tartness, but because it was handed to you during a moment of kindness. These aren't just preferences, they're emotional maps, coordinates. Even pregnancy cravings, often dismissed as hormonal chaos, may be the brain's way of reconnecting with ancient comfort signals. The body changes, identity shifts. So the brain scans history, looking for symbols of stability. Eat this, it says. It made you feel safe once. In some cultures, food is memory made edible. Recipes are passed down as emotional legacies. Your grandmother's curry doesn't just feed you. It connects you to her voice, her laughter, her kitchen. One bite, and she's there again. The craving isn't physical. It's spiritual. A request from your past self to remember. Even in modern life, comfort food isn't just comfort, it's code. We joke about eating ice cream after a breakup, but we rarely ask why that helps. Maybe it's what you shared on a good day. Maybe it's what your best friend brought you once without asking. The flavor pulls memory into the present. You're not alone anymore. You're connected. But what happens when the memory isn't retrieved? When you eat the craved food, but feel nothing? That's when you know the craving wasn't about satisfaction. It was a ping. An incomplete download, a signal sent through flavor, searching for a file that may have been lost or suppressed, and this can be haunting. You stand in the kitchen, eating something with urgency, tears in your eyes, no idea why. Your brain is looking for something it can't quite find, so it sends taste after taste into the dark, hoping one of them opens the door. We are walking archives of flavor-coded emotion. Cravings are the whispers between the shelves. Some are benign, some are beautiful, and some are ghosts. Memories too powerful to show themselves, but too important to stay buried. So they speak in craving, in hunger, in scent. So the next time your mouth waters for something strange, pause. Don't just eat. Ask what you're remembering, what your body is trying to recover. Because that craving might not be calling your stomach. It might be calling your soul. Dreams run debrief sequences. You close your eyes, and reality fades. The room disappears. Your name doesn't matter anymore. Neither does time. You drift into a world made of fragments, symbols, impossible physics, and people you haven't seen in years. But while your body sleeps, something else awakens. The mind's quiet operator, sorting through everything you couldn't make sense of while awake. This is not random. This is a debrief. Your dreams are not chaos. They're computation. They are compressed file folders being opened, rewritten, deleted, renamed, while you float through them unaware. Your brain, for all its poetry and mystery, is an engine of survival. And it does its most important work not when you're active, but when you're vulnerable. Sleeping, still, offline. Every night, your brain initiates what scientists call memory consolidation. It scans through the day's events, some vivid, some barely noticed. The meaningful, the emotional, the confusing, the repressed. It runs simulations, checks emotional triggers, and decides what to keep, what to discard, what to bury so deep you might never find it again. Imagine a tired archivist working through a chaotic stack of memories. Here's the embarrassment from this morning. Here's the surprise text from a stranger. Here's the worry about your future. Here's that odd smell that reminded you of childhood. Your brain takes each one and processes it. Not linearly, but symbolically. It turns your fears into monsters. Your hopes into flying, your guilt into being chased, and your anxieties into twisted narratives where logic breaks down, but meaning remains. And while you're dreaming, you don't realize the processing is happening. Because your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking, goes dim. That's why time bends in dreams. That's why dead people can talk to you. That's why you can run through endless corridors without questioning why the hallway never ends. It's not a glitch, it's design. Dreams are encoded in emotional logic, not factual rules. That's why they're so hard to describe, and even harder to forget once you try to explain them. They aren't made to be remembered. They're made to clean up your mental desktop, file away what matters, and defrag the noise. Some scientists even compare REM sleep, the most vivid dream state, to a kind of nightly therapy session. It's when your brain replays painful memories, but softens the emotional spikes. That breakup, that trauma, that failure. In dreams, they get filed into safer folders. The emotions are reprocessed, muted, buffered, so you can face tomorrow without drowning in yesterday. This is why people deprived of REM sleep become irritable, paranoid, and emotionally volatile. Without the debrief, you accumulate raw, unprocessed data, and your mind starts crashing. Just like a cluttered computer, it slows down, overheats, misfires. But dreams don't just process pain, they play with possibility. They simulate scenarios your waking mind would never risk. A conversation with your younger self. A leap from a rooftop that becomes flight. A job interview where you're naked and strangely unbothered. These aren't random, they're cognitive stress tests. Your brain exploring edge cases, rehearsing responses, gauging how much emotional weight certain themes carry. And when you wake up, most of it is gone. Because once the sorting's done, the system discards the scaffolding. You're left with residue, a feeling, a fragment, a single image that haunts you for reasons you can't explain. But some dreams stay. The recurring ones, the intense ones, the nightmares. Why? Because they weren't finished. Your brain flagged them for further review. Something unresolved, something too heavy to archive. And so, it loops night after night, knocking at the door you keep locked while awake. Even lucid dreams, where you become aware you're dreaming, are just you, catching a glimpse of the control room. And once you do, the system adjusts. You can shape the file sorting. You can rewrite endings. You can confront fears directly. You become the archivist, not just the observer. And maybe that's the final truth. Dreaming isn't passive. It's your brain's way of cleaning the slate without your conscious interference. It's the universe inside you, taking out the trash, hanging new art, locking doors, and leaving some open just a crack, just in case you're ready to see what's behind them. So the next time you wake up from a dream that made no sense, where your teeth fell out, or you were back in high school, or talking to someone who's long gone, don't dismiss it as nonsense. Ask what it was trying to file, what feeling it was trying to store, what truth it was trying to smuggle past your defenses. Because every dream is a message from your deeper self, a coded debrief from the unconscious. And if you're brave enough to listen, sometimes it tells you everything you didn't know you needed to hear. Napping bypasses ego defenses. You tell yourself it's just a nap, a quick recharge, a break from the noise. But what if it's something deeper? What if that sudden midday sleepiness isn't about physical rest at all, but a shutdown sequence, triggered when your conscious mind becomes too noisy, too stubborn, too resistant to truth? Napping isn't just about fatigue, it's about surrender. The moment your eyes close in the middle of the day, your brain begins running diagnostics, silently, automatically. And what it's really doing is bypassing the ego. That guarded, defensive, reality-controlling part of your mind finally goes offline, and something older, quieter, more truthful begins to stir. Your subconscious comes out of the shadows. You see, the ego is a brilliant storyteller. It rewrites pain. It deflects blame. It justifies, defends, rationalizes, but it's also fragile, constantly on guard, filtering every moment through what it wants to believe. And eventually, that strain builds up. Your mind begins to glitch. You miss obvious signals. You repeat patterns you swore you'd broken. You ignore intuition. That's when your body intervenes. You get drowsy. You crave a nap. It's not laziness. It's a forced reboot. Studies show that short naps improve not just memory and alertness, but emotional regulation. And more intriguingly, brain scans reveal that even during a light nap, the The brain continues to process information from earlier in the day, especially emotional information. But this processing happens without ego interference. The brain sorts truths you weren't ready to face. It patches emotional errors you tried to suppress. It rewires perspectives your waking mind rejected. Ever woken from a nap with a sudden realization? A feeling of clarity? A strange sense that something important just happened, even if you can't explain what? That's the subconscious, whispering its truth through the cracks. In fact, some cultures treat naps as sacred. In certain indigenous traditions and Eastern philosophies, midday sleep is seen as a spiritual threshold, a moment where waking reality thins and deeper layers of the self become accessible. In modern psychology, this mirrors hypnagogic states, the dreamlike doorway between wakefulness and sleep, where insights, images, and emotions rise unfiltered. It's the space where invention happens, where buried feelings finally speak. But most of us rush past it. We see napping as indulgence, weakness, a pause button, when really, it's more like a maintenance mode, a crucial update, and the more we resist it, the more the system crashes. Your subconscious is always watching, noticing contradictions, collecting emotional data, tracking the gap between who you say you are and who you really are. And when the gap grows too wide, the body demands a reset, not with deep sleep, not with meditation, but with the strange, vulnerable, ego-light space of a nap. It's no coincidence that children nap during their most rapid developmental stages. Their minds are constantly reorganizing, but adults don't stop changing. We just stop making space for that reorganization. And so, the subconscious uses what it can. Small windows of stillness, softness, surrender. A nap becomes therapy without words. A truth serum without force. So, the next time you feel that heavy wave pulling you mid-afternoon, ask yourself, what am I resisting? What am I not willing to feel? What truth is trying to rise? And what part of me is standing in its way? Because that nap you're fighting might be less about energy and more about alignment. Less about escape and more about return. Return to your inner voice, your real needs, your unspoken patterns. The ones your ego keeps silencing. Let it go quiet. Let the defenses drop. Close your eyes and let the mind begin its secret repair. Mimicry unlocks social access. You think you're just crossing your arms because it feels comfortable. Or maybe you tilt your head when they do, laugh just a second after they do, sip your drink when they sip theirs. But it's not random. It's not subconscious coincidence. It's mimicry. And beneath that surface-level gesture lies something deeper, an ancient, invisible code for belonging. Humans are wired for imitation. It's not a trick. It's survival. Before language, before fire, before tribes had names, we had movement. We had gestures. And when two people mirrored each other, even unconsciously, it was a sign. I'm safe. I'm with you. I'm one of you. In modern times, we call it social mimicry, but it's older than society itself. Watch two people in deep conversation. Their postures start to sync. They breathe at the same rhythm. One touches their face, and the other follows seconds later. This isn't mockery. It's trust in motion. The brain is running silent scripts, scanning for sameness, because sameness meant safety in the wild. If you moved like the group, you belonged. If you didn't, you were a threat. Or you were alone. And here's where it gets stranger. This mimicry happens without your permission. The brain's mirror neuron system detects movement and emotion and replicates it in your own neural circuitry. When someone smiles, your brain activates as if you're smiling. When they frown, your muscles twitch in sympathy. Your body copies their energy, not because it's polite, but because it's coded to seek connection. This is the neural password. Not what you say, not what you wear, but how subtly your body aligns with theirs. It's a behavioral handshake that opens the gates of trust. That's why job interviewers prefer candidates who subtly mirror their tone and posture. Why dates go better when both people sip their drinks in rhythm. Why charismatic leaders often match their audience before leading them. Mimicry is not weakness, it's strategy. And yet, it doesn't feel like strategy. It feels natural, intuitive. You lean forward when they do because you're interested, but that interest is being broadcast in a language more ancient than words. The other person senses the similarity, and their brain releases oxytocin, connection, rapport, safety, all because your bodies are speaking a forgotten dialect of motion. But not all mimicry is innocent. Con artists use it to build false trust. Interrogators use it to coax confessions. Politicians and influencers rehearse it to mirror their audience and harvest allegiance. Because when someone mirrors you, your brain sees a reflection, not a threat. You let them closer. You share more. You nod without realizing you're nodding. And just like that, the wall is gone. This is why children mimic their parents, because it gives them access to approval. Why new employees mimic the office tone, because it gives them access to culture. Why travelers adopt accents, speech rhythms, mannerisms, because it gives them access to unfamiliar environments without rejection. And when mimicry breaks, so does access. You felt it before. That cold edge in a conversation when someone's tone stays flat while yours rises. That awkwardness when your enthusiasm meets blank stares. That disconnect when your gesture is not returned. It's not always about content, it's about calibration. When mimicry is missing, the brain suspects something is off. But mimicry isn't just about others. It also reveals you to yourself. Think of someone you truly admire. Now notice how you've picked up their phrases, their laugh, their pacing. That's not coincidence. It's identity forming in response to admiration. We become like those we seek acceptance from. Not because we're weak, but because that's how the brain updates its social map. In its purest form, mimicry is empathy in motion. You don't just listen, you align. You don't just speak, you harmonize. And the reward? Access to hearts, to minds, to rooms you'd never enter through logic alone. So, the next time you find yourself crossing your legs right after someone else does, or laughing a beat too closely, don't dismiss it as awkwardness. Recognize it for what it is. Your nervous system typing the password of acceptance, matching tone, mirroring pace, calibrating to belong. Because in a world saturated with noise and words, the silent language of mimicry is still the one that opens the most doors. Checking phone is reassurance loop. You unlock your phone again. No new messages, no missed calls, just the same screen, the same silence. You lock it. A few minutes pass and you check again. Still nothing. But this time, it feels like something. Like confirmation. Like breath. Like existence whispered back, yes, you're still here. Most people assume we check our phones for updates, for information, entertainment, social interaction, but the truth is quieter, more primal. Often we're not seeking something new. We're seeking reassurance, a digital heartbeat, a soft ping from the void saying, you are still connected, the world hasn't forgotten you. This loop is not random, it's ancient instinct, dressed in glass and code. In early human history, isolation meant danger, disconnection meant death. We survived through proximity, through signals from others, footsteps, glances, firelight. The tribe's presence was our safety net. Without it, we were vulnerable, prey, alone. That fear hasn't left us. It's just evolved. Now, instead of scanning the trees or listening for footsteps, we check our phones. We scroll through timelines like we once scanned the horizon. We look for signs of life, not in the wild, but in our notifications. It's not boredom, it's survival. Each glance at the screen is a check-in with the collective. Has anyone reached out? Does the world remember I exist? Am I part of something, still? And when there's nothing there, we don't just feel disappointed. We feel unacknowledged, like a subtle erasure, not tragic, just ghostly. The technology is modern, but the behavior is primal, and the loop doesn't even need reward to continue. That's the paradox. Even when there's nothing new, we keep checking, because the act itself becomes the comfort. The motion of unlocking, swiping, scrolling, it mimics presence. It simulates connection. Your body says, I did something. Your mind says, I am part of something, even if no one replied. This is the reassurance loop. And it's not limited to messages or social media. Even just looking at the time, checking an app, refreshing a feed, these are micro habits of self-soothing. Not because they inform us, but because they anchor us. In moments of anxiety, uncertainty, boredom, or loneliness, the phone becomes a touchstone, a portal to the sense that the larger world still exists. Think about this. The average person touches their phone over 2,600 times a day. That's not obsession. That's a ritual. That's a modern echo of the ancient need to hear the campfire crackling, to see eyes looking back, to know we are not alone in the dark. And for many people, especially those struggling with anxiety, depression, or trauma. The phone becomes a lifeline, not because it delivers anything useful, but because it might. Because each check is a coin flip. Maybe this time, someone reached out. Maybe this time, a sign will appear. Hope lives in the possibility, not the result. But there's a cost. The loop, over time, can morph from comfort into compulsion. The brain begins to associate stillness with uncertainty. Quiet moments become threatening. So, you check again, not because you want to, but because not checking feels unsafe. The absence of input becomes its own kind of fear. And so, we reach for the device before we sleep. When we wake, in line at the store, in mid-conversation, on the toilet, in elevators, after an argument, in the middle of laughter. We interrupt the present moment, not to escape it, but to validate it, to ask the void, are we okay? Is everything still real? Because at the core, we're not addicted to our phones. We're addicted to reassurance, to the illusion that someone somewhere is on the other end, that we are not vanishing, that we have not slipped from the story. And it's not just about social contact, it's about continuity. The phone becomes a mirror that reflects back a version of reality we recognize. Notifications, familiar apps, the repetition of gestures, tap, scroll, swipe. It creates a loop of identity confirmation. I'm still me. This is still my life. This is still the world. When that loop is broken, when the phone is lost, dead, or silent, it feels like losing a limb. Like stepping into a version of reality that hasn't been confirmed. Like drifting in deep water without a lighthouse. Because in many ways, the phone has become our modern lighthouse. Always there, always glowing. Always ready to blink once for yes, never for no. But here's the truth hiding beneath that comfort. The world does go on without you. The silence doesn't mean you're forgotten, it means nothing happened yet. And that's okay. Not every moment needs a ping. Not every breath needs a mirror. The hardest lesson is learning to sit in the quiet and still feel real. So the next time you catch yourself reaching for your phone for the 20th time in an hour, ask yourself, what am I really checking? Is it the messages, the weather, or is it something deeper? Something like, am I still here? Because maybe what we're all really doing is looking for proof of our own presence. Maybe the screen isn't a distraction. It's a beacon. Maybe every scroll is a soft cry into the digital dark. Is anyone out there? And sometimes, just knowing you asked, that alone is enough. Inner monologue is compressed code. You hear it every day, but barely notice it. That whisper in your head, the voice that speaks without moving lips, the inner monologue. It feels like you talking to yourself, but it's more than that. It's your brain's operating system, coded in shortcuts, built to condense your chaos into action. Contrary to what many believe, our thoughts aren't always formed in full sentences. That internal voice doesn't draft essays, it throws pings, impulses, emotional packets wrapped in fragments of language. When you think, go, or stop, or why did I say that? You're not just narrating life, you're decoding it at lightning speed. Because the voice in your head is compressed code. It doesn't need to explain everything. It knows the backstory. It knows your traumas, your patterns, your fears, and condenses all of that into the briefest whisper. One flash of inner dialogue can contain the weight of a decade. Think about it. You walk into a room and instantly feel uncomfortable. The voice says, nope. That one syllable carries years of memory, facial expressions, social misfires, past humiliations. It's your subconscious compressing all that data into a single emotional command. You feel it before you can even explain it. This is how the brain saves time. It doesn't always think in words. It thinks in emotional cues, chemical signals, micro-thoughts. But to make them usable, the mind wraps them in language just tight enough to steer behavior. Not to explain, just to direct. You've felt it during arguments. Your mouth says one thing, but your inner voice is screaming something else. Or when you're falling asleep and suddenly remember an old failure, your brain flashes an entire scene with just one phrase. Stupid. That word doesn't describe the whole memory. It triggers it. It's the key, not the file. Writers know this well. Inner monologue isn't always structured. It's jagged, fragmented, rhythmic. Because real thought isn't polished. It's raw. It's coded. When you're anxious, the voice in your head might just say, too much. Leave. Quiet. now. That's not a sentence. It's a command line, a script firing in shorthand. And it gets even more complex. For many people, the inner voice isn't even in words, it's in feeling, images, tones. The words are just translations. If you've ever had a gut reaction without any verbal explanation, that was your compressed monologue operating pre-language. Before words, there was still thought. There was still direction. Children show us this clearly. Before they learn to speak, they still hesitate, reach, avoid. Their brains are running scripts without verbal narration. Later, as language develops, those scripts don't disappear. They just gain subtitles. The internal voice becomes a guide, not a narrator. Sometimes, that inner guide becomes corrupted. If you've experienced trauma, the voice becomes harsh, abrupt, repetitive. You can't, don't try, you'll fail. Not because it's true, but because your brain has encoded survival into defensiveness. It's trying to protect you by limiting you. These aren't thoughts, they're defense mechanisms. And that's the scary part. We often believe the voice in our head is us, but it's not. It's an interface, a compression tool. It translates years of experience into micro thoughts that feel real. But they're not always true. They're not always right. They're just efficient. You might think, I'm not good enough. But that's not your full belief. It's a shortcut. Underneath might be complex fears about abandonment, perfectionism, comparison, but the mind doesn't narrate all that. It simplifies. And sometimes that simplification becomes the prison. Learning to decode your inner monologue is one of the most powerful things you can do. To hear the voice, not just listen, but trace it. Ask, why did that phrase pop up? What memory is it tied to? What emotion is it skipping over? Because often, the voice isn't giving you answers, it's giving you access, a way in. Some mental health therapies now focus directly on inner speech, rewiring the shortcuts, not by changing what you say, but by understanding why you say it. If your brain has coded certain memories as danger, the voice will keep looping defensive lines until you rewrite the underlying script. That's why silence is so confronting for many people. When the world gets quiet, the inner voice gets louder. And if that voice is unkind, uncertain, or looping trauma, it echoes without escape. Meditation, journaling, therapy, they all work by making space to stretch those compressed thoughts, to expand the code, to read between the lines, because you are not just the voice in your head. You are the author behind it. And once you start decoding that compressed monologue, you'll realize something startling. Much of what you think is reactive was written years ago. You're just playing it back. So next time your brain shouts a phrase that feels too sharp, too fast, too familiar, pause. Decompress it. Ask what it's hiding, what it's trying to say in a rush. Because that voice isn't always your enemy. Sometimes it's a message from an earlier version of you, trying to protect, trying to warn, or just trying to be heard before the next thought takes over. Framing rooms for territory. You walk into a room, maybe it's a cafe, a stranger's apartment, a hotel lobby, or your own living room. You say you're admiring the furniture, the lighting, the atmosphere. But your brain? It's running a scan. Where are the exits? Who's near the door? How many windows? Are the corners dark? How far is the nearest object you could use to block or shield? These thoughts don't arrive as words. They don't interrupt your flow. They're fast, quiet, automatic. And they shape how you feel in that space before you realize why. This is not design. This is survival. Your brain frames rooms not as aesthetic spaces, but as territory. Every new environment you enter becomes a potential stage for defense or escape. You aren't just stepping into a room, you're mapping it, evaluating it, preparing to own it or flee from it. It's not about comfort. It's about control. The reason? Evolution. For most of human history, being in the wrong place at the wrong time meant death. Being in the open meant exposure. Being cornered meant vulnerability. Being near the fire meant safety, but only if your back was covered. This wiring didn't disappear when cities rose or architecture evolved. It just dressed up as intuition. Ever notice how you instinctively sit facing the door at a restaurant? Or how you avoid turning your back to a crowd? Or how you feel slightly more at ease near a wall? That's not coincidence. That's territorial scanning. Studies show that people consistently prefer seating with clear views of entry points. We choose spaces that allow us to monitor movement. Even in environments we know are safe, Our bodies lean toward configurations that mimic ancient survival setups: back to a wall, eyes on the opening. Interior designers exploit this without always knowing why. A well-lit path to the door, an open layout that lets you spot anyone approaching, strategic mirrors that expand your field of vision. We call it good taste, but your nervous system calls it a safety net. You may call it a cozy room, but what you're really describing is a space where your defensive reflexes are calm, the angles feel right, the shadows aren't threatening, the doors are visible, your brain isn't working overtime to assess threat. Now, flip the feeling. You walk into a narrow hallway with dim lighting, a crowded room where you can't see the exit, a cluttered space with too many blind spots. You feel anxious, even if nothing happens, because your brain is still scanning, still warning you of ancient danger patterns, no matter how modern your surroundings look. Even in your own home, your behavior is guided by this silent scan. Why do you decorate certain corners but leave others empty? Why do you keep the hallway clear? Why do you instinctively glance at a window when hearing a noise outside? Because you are always mapping, organizing, assigning meaning to space. Not for beauty, but for command. And it's not just about threat. It's about dominance, territory, control. The placement of your belongings sends signals, not just to others, but to your subconscious. A desk angled to face the room gives psychological authority. A chair pulled slightly away from the wall suggests readiness to move. A mirror by the entrance is more than decor. It's a second set of eyes watching the threshold. In social settings, the same rules apply. We gravitate toward territorial cues, seating that gives us visibility, objects that create buffers between us and others. In meetings, those who claim space at the head of the table often feel more in control, not because of the view, but because of the implied perimeter. Even children display this instinct. Watch a toddler enter a new room. They don't go straight to the center. They hug the walls, observe, circle. They move to corners first, securing vantage points. Only once they feel safe do they venture inward. It's not neurotic. It's ancient. It's the same instinct that helped our ancestors survive caves, forests, and open plains. And yet, we rarely talk about it. We call it just how I like things. We chalk it up to preference, habit, or feng shui. But at its root, it's your brain assigning defensive architecture to your surroundings, deciding whether this space is neutral, owned, dangerous, or ready to be claimed. So, the next time you step into a room and feel an immediate emotional shift, pause. Ask what your brain is scanning, what your nervous system is calculating. It may be mapping exits, measuring space, recalling past spatial memories, or simply asking the question your ancestors once asked in every environment. Am I safe here? Because in the end, your brain doesn't care about decoration. It cares about territory, and even in silence, it is always framing the room. Repetition unlocks identity, loops. You repeat the same routine day after day, the same route to work, the same drink order, the same playlist. It feels like comfort, familiarity. But what if it's more than that? What if repetition isn't just habit, but identity architecture? What if your sense of who you are isn't built on introspection, but on loops? This is the hidden mechanism behind identity. Repetition doesn't just create habits. It forges selfhood. Each repeated action becomes a vote, a signal, a stabilizing pattern in the chaos. You aren't just drinking coffee, you're becoming the kind of person who drinks coffee. You're not just showing up on time, you're cementing the identity of someone who is responsible, reliable, disciplined. The more you repeat, the stronger the narrative becomes. And here's where it gets strange. Repetition unlocks identity loops, not by revealing who you are, but by hiding who you aren't. Every repeated action is a choice not to be something else. And over time, this anchoring creates the illusion that your identity is stable, fixed, known. But is it? Psychologists and neuroscientists have long observed that humans crave pattern, not because it's efficient, but because it's definitional. If your behavior were completely random, you wouldn't know how to describe yourself. If one day you were patient and the next day explosive, one day a leader and the next avoidant, what would remain of you? Repetition becomes the glue, a narrative loop that convinces the brain, this is me. And the more that loop repeats, the more resistant it becomes to change. This is why personal transformation is so difficult. You're not just trying to alter a habit, You're threatening the operating system that supports your identity. That's why you feel discomfort when trying something new. It's not fear of failure, it's ego disorientation. The loop is breaking, and the illusion of selfhood begins to wobble. There's a deeper irony here, because repetition feels like control. It feels like choice, but it's often autopilot. You're repeating because it feels like you, and it feels like you because you're repeating. The loop feeds itself. Consider rituals: brushing your teeth, checking your phone, telling yourself you're bad at math, saying I'm shy at parties, starting every morning with the same internal monologue. These are not just behaviors, they're identity affirmations, silent reinforcements. You're not just doing them, you're becoming them. And the scariest part? Most of this is invisible. Your conscious mind believes it's in charge, but the loop is older. The subconscious watches for repeated input and builds identity scaffolding around it. Once the pattern is strong enough, it resists disruption, even if that disruption is growth. But here's where the revelation lives. If identity is a loop, then it can be rewritten. Not overnight, not with declarations, but with different repetition, with small, consistent disruptions. You don't need to find your true self in a breakthrough moment. You need to build it, pattern by pattern. You don't become confident by thinking differently. You become confident by doing confident things until your brain says, "This must be who I am." This is why affirmations work, not as magic words, but as neural repetition. It's why journaling, daily movement, creative routines, even posture habits, all shift identity slowly, through anchored repetition. But you must be intentional, because if you don't control your loops, the world will assign them for you. Algorithms, trauma, criticism, and culture will feed you repetition until you adopt identities that were never yours. You'll find yourself saying, "This is just who I am," without realizing you've been rehearsing that line for years. So the question is not just, who are you, but what are you repeating? Because in the end, identity isn't a truth, it's a rhythm. A dance of choices repeated until they write a name. And if you change the steps, slowly, gently, deliberately, the dance changes too. Scent as memory override. You smell it, and time collapses. The perfume your grandmother wore, the chlorine from summer pools, burnt sugar, wet earth. A scent enters your nose and suddenly, you're somewhere else. Not in a memory exactly, but inside it. As if the past has swallowed the present and reactivated a part of you that words can't reach. Scent isn't just memory, it's override. A neural shortcut with no gatekeeper. Unlike sight or sound, which pass through layers of processing and interpretation, smell goes straight into the limbic system, the seat of emotion, survival, and raw instinct. No translation, no permission, just immediate access. It's the only sense with a direct hotline to the amygdala and hippocampus, the parts of your brain responsible for fear, love, trauma, and long-term memory. That's why a smell doesn't just remind you of a moment, it rebuilds it. The room, the lighting, the feeling, even the heart rate you had in that instant. You don't just remember, you relive. And you can't control it. This is why grief often arrives with no warning, not because of a thought, but because of a scent. The shampoo of someone lost, the old book smell that transports you to childhood. One inhale and your body is flooded. Tears, laughter, tension, longing, all from a molecule in the air. Smell is your brain's ancient surveillance system. In evolutionary terms, it was never about pleasure, it was about protection. Is this edible or toxic? Is the wind carrying a predator's scent? Is the fire still burning? Before we had language, we had scent. Before we understood time, we understood danger through our noses. And even now, with skyscrapers and smartphones, we obey it. Scents shape behavior. Supermarkets pump out artificial bakery smells to increase impulse buying. Real estate agents use fresh citrus to trigger feelings of cleanliness and safety. Casinos are laced with engineered aromas to make you stay longer, feel luckier. You think you're in control, but your nose made the decision first, and it's personal, because everyone's scent memory map is unique. No two people smell a scent the same way, because your experiences coded your responses. For you, gasoline might feel like freedom, road trips, escape. For someone else, it might mean fear, car accidents, chaos. The same chemical, different neural imprint. That's why scents are used in therapy. to treat trauma, to unlock lost memories. Alzheimer's patients who forget names and faces often remember through smell, a certain flower, a soap, a food, and suddenly a part of them reawakens, not through logic, through scent. But it can also betray you. You might not know why you trust someone, or why you don't, but their natural scent, even masked by perfume, could be clashing with your subconscious safety profile. Studies show that we're drawn to people whose body chemistry complements ours. That chemistry people talk about? It's not metaphor, it's molecular. You're literally smelling compatibility. And sometimes, scent triggers warning, without explanation. You enter a room and something smells wrong. Too clean, too stale, too sweet. Your brain flags it. The hairs on your neck rise. You don't know why, but your ancient alarm bell is ringing. That's the olfactory override at work. Even love is affected. Long after someone's gone, what we miss most isn't their voice or face, but their scent. It lingers in shirts, pillows, old jackets, and it can break you with a single breath. Not because you forgot, but because you never stopped feeling. That's the paradox of scent. It lives at the edge of awareness, barely noticed until it hits you like a storm. And then it's everything. A time machine, a warning system, a memory unshackled from words. It bypasses reason and speaks to something older, truer. So the next time a breeze carries something familiar, don't shrug it off. Let it in. Let it pull the thread. That scent has something to say, not to your mind, but to the part of you that remembers before memory, the part of you that never forgot. Because in the archive of your life, scent is the key you didn't know you buried. Leaving rooms breaks spells. You get up with purpose, maybe to grab your keys, your phone, your drink. You walk into the next room, and suddenly it's gone. The purpose, the memory, the spell. You stand there, lost, blank, confused. What was I doing again? It seems small, silly even. But this moment is not just forgetfulness. It's not distraction. It's a glitch in the mind's spatial programming, a built-in function, not a flaw. Because when you leave a room, your brain doesn't just track physical movement. It ends the mental scene, just like closing a book, just like walking off stage. This is called the doorway effect, and it's very real. Your memory is not a single stream. It's organized in scenes bound by context, location, and moment. When you're in one space, your mind is running a mental script, loaded with short-term goals, tasks, and details. But when you cross a threshold, literally move from one room to another, your brain interprets it as the end of a scene and flushes the immediate working memory. It terminates the code of what you were just doing. Because in evolutionary terms, moving through space often meant shifting survival modes. Leaving the safety of a hut meant entering the hunt. Walking into a cave meant preparing for shelter or danger. Crossing boundaries demanded a mental reset, a wipe of what just happened to make room for what's next. And we haven't lost that instinct. This is why you can walk into the kitchen with a mission and suddenly feel like a ghost in your own life. Not because you're losing your mind, but because your brain is designed to protect it. It prioritizes now over just then, and it assumes that if a new environment begins, the last one is no longer relevant, so it presses reset. And this reset is not just about physical rooms. It happens when you switch tabs, change conversations, scroll to a new topic, or shift focus. Every threshold, every border your mind crosses creates a potential memory rupture, a micro-amnesia, a controlled forgetting. It's elegant, really, efficient, but frustrating. Because we want continuity, and the brain wants segmentation. We want memory to follow intention, but the brain is following location. So when we walk into a new room and the intention is gone, it's not just forgetfulness. It's the result of a perfectly calibrated system, choosing context over task. And it doesn't stop there. Think of how often changing environments changes your thoughts. Ever return to a childhood home and feel flooded with old emotions? Ever step outside and suddenly remember something from years ago? That's your brain reloading a mental file it stored in that particular environment. Because memory is spatial. The brain bookmarks feelings and fragments of self in places. When we re-enter those spaces, it reactivates what was once tied to them. Now, imagine what happens when we leave a space. The thoughts tied to that space don't always follow. They get suspended, like a spell broken. The mind doesn't erase them, but it files them away. waiting for the moment you return, waiting for the old context to reboot the old code. This is also why leaving one task to start another is so difficult. It's not about motivation. It's about environmental cues. If you want to focus, your space needs to anchor that focus. If you keep changing rooms, tabs, screens, your brain will keep resetting, not because it's broken, but because it's trying to keep up with you. It's trying to protect your cognitive bandwidth. But what's most mysterious is how we experience this glitch. That feeling of standing in a new room, utterly disconnected from the thought that brought you there. It's disorienting, humbling, like waking up mid-dream and losing the story. And sometimes, it's not even about tasks. It's about self. You forget who you were just being. You walk into a new space and suddenly feel different. The posture shifts, the energy changes, the emotions adjust. Like the version of you from the last room got paused, and this version, just loaded. Because maybe we don't just move through rooms. Maybe rooms move through us. Maybe each threshold reprograms the you that shows up. And maybe forgetting isn't failure, it's transformation. So the next time you forget why you walked into a room, don't scold yourself. Pause. Feel the code fade. Feel the spell break. You just crossed a border your brain recognized, and it made a choice. This is a new scene. And maybe, if you step back through the door, you'll remember again. Maybe the code's still there, waiting for its context to return. Reading feeds simulated reality. When you open a book, something eerie happens. Your eyes scan symbols, your hands turn paper, but your mind disappears. You're no longer in your room, no longer conscious of the light, the chair, the time. You're inside another world, another voice, another self. And you didn't ask for it. You didn't decide to be transported. It just happened. Because reading doesn't just entertain, it simulates. And every time you read, you willingly upload foreign programming into your mind. We talk about books like they're harmless escapes. A good story takes you away, we say. But where do you go? You don't leave the room, but you leave your body. Your heart races during a fictional chase. Your eyes tear up over invented grief. Your breath slows as you read about stillness. Your brain is reacting, not as if, but because it believes. This is the simulation. You take ink on paper and transform it into experience. The brain doesn't see words, it runs code. You imagine faces you've never seen, hear voices that were never spoken aloud, and feel pain that isn't yours. That's not escape. That's internal reconstruction. That's downloading an alternate version of reality, one shaped by an author you've never met. Neuroscientists have found that the same regions of the brain activate when you read about an action as when you perform it. Read about someone climbing, and your motor cortex responds. Read about grief, and your limbic system lights up. The simulation becomes embodied, felt, and stored. Your brain doesn't always tag it as fiction. This is why stories stick, why you remember characters better than classmates, why a single sentence can haunt you for years. Because you didn't just read it, you lived it, somewhere inside your neural architecture. You ran that script. You processed that alternate life. And part of you, no matter how small, changed because of it. Children understand this instinctively. They don't separate story from world. The line between fiction and reality is blurry, and that blur is where empathy is born. When a child reads about a dragon, or a death, or a betrayal, they feel it is real. And in that feeling, they grow. They acquire memories not of their own making, and those memories shape how they see the world. But adults do this too. Every time you lose yourself in a novel, you're accepting new architecture, a new map of how the world might work. It's not always conscious. You might finish a book and think, that was beautiful. But what actually happened is that a piece of someone else's perspective was written into your mind, line by line, until your perception of reality subtly tilted. Books teach us to simulate identity, to become other people without dying to do it. When you read, you're not watching someone's story, you're wearing it, internally, intimately. It's the only form of telepathy we've ever truly mastered, and here's where it gets even stranger. The more we read, the more these simulations accumulate, layer after layer of realities that never happened, but still influence how we think, speak, trust, fear. You may have never walked through a war zone, but you've read it, never been abandoned. But a book taught your brain how it might feel. These are preloaded scripts, emotional rehearsals for futures that may or may not come. That's why reading can heal and harm. A single paragraph can unravel trauma you didn't know you buried. A well-constructed character can become a voice you carry through crisis. A cruel line, misunderstood, can echo through decades. Stories are simulations, yes, but the consequences bleed. Writers are simulation architects. They design realities you inhabit through nothing more than suggestion, a tone, a rhythm, a name. The best ones know this. They don't just describe, they inject. They calibrate your imagination and let the simulation run. And you, unknowingly, surrender. Even nonfiction does this. Biographies, history, essays, all of them rewrite internal models of reality. You learn how someone lived, and suddenly your own life feels different. You read about a moment in time and begin to filter your own moments through that lens. The brain doesn't care if it happened to you. If the system processed it, it counts. This is why censorship exists, why dictators fear books more than bullets. Because a story can simulate rebellion. A poem can run code that destabilizes compliance. Fiction becomes a virus, one that slips past walls and whispers. It doesn't have to be this way. You read in private, alone, silent. But what's happening in your mind is loud. It's expansive. The simulation reshapes you from the inside out. Your vocabulary shifts. Your tolerance bends. Your imagination stretches until the boundaries of your known world are no longer safe. And when you close the book, you're not the same. You re-enter your life, slightly altered, a little less certain, a little more aware. You've touched a different world, and now it echoes. So, the next time you say you're reading to escape, pause. You're not escaping. You're expanding. You're absorbing another possible existence, another version of what it means to feel, to suffer, to hope. Books are not distractions. They are dangerous. Because once a simulation has run, it leaves a trace, and those traces become the foundation for who you might one day become. Music alters body, algorithms. You press play, a beat begins, a melody rises, and something inside you shifts. Not just your mood, not just your attention, but your body, your pulse, your breathing, your chemistry, all begin to recalibrate, almost like a system reboot initiated by sound. This isn't magic, it's code. Music is the only stimulus that can reach the entire brain at once. Not even language does that. Not sight, not smell, just music. Rhythm becomes the operating system. Melody becomes the patch. Harmony becomes the hidden script, rewriting your emotional firmware in real time. It starts with your heart. Your heartbeat doesn't just respond to exertion or fear. It responds to sound. Play a slow, steady rhythm, and your heart slows to match. Play fast, chaotic music, and the beat quickens. This process is called entrainment, where biological systems fall into sync with an external rhythm. Your body literally tunes itself to what it hears, and it doesn't stop there. Your breathing shifts, your pupils dilate, your blood pressure changes. Neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, even oxytocin adjust. Your brain floods your bloodstream with emotional cocktails, triggered by vibrations you can't even touch. We say music moves us, but we forget that's literal. It moves us biologically. A song with the right tempo can reduce stress hormones like cortisol. It can increase pain tolerance. It can help stroke patients relearn movement. It can reduce anxiety in surgery. It can trigger memory in Alzheimer's patients when nothing else can. Because music isn't entertainment, it's programming. Imagine your body as a complex machine, billions of cells running parallel processes. Music enters like a tuning fork. It finds the static, the dissonance, and smooths it. It aligns chaos into pattern. That's why a single song can transport you, bring tears, elicit goosebumps, trigger a flood of forgotten memories. It's accessing data stored in deep vaults, unlocking emotional scripts you didn't even know were there, and the effects are specific. Bass-heavy beats stimulate motor regions in the brain, making you want to move. High frequencies tap emotional centers. Dissonant intervals create unease. Harmonic resolution triggers reward pathways. Your brain isn't just listening, it's decoding, reacting, updating. Different genres trigger different parts of the mind. Classical enhances spatial reasoning. Ambient can induce trance states. Metal and punk regulate anger through controlled catharsis. Jazz activates improvisational centers. Hip-hop boosts verbal fluency. Lullabies literally entrain infant heart rates to match their mother's voice and rhythm. It goes deeper. Your body remembers the music that comforted you during pain. It remembers the song you heard during your first heartbreak. The one that played at the funeral. The one that saved you when you felt like nothing else could reach you. Those tracks aren't just songs. They're encoded scripts, recovery protocols, recovery prayers, and when you revisit them, your system reactivates the emotional landscape from before. That's not nostalgia. That's neurological replay. Think of athletes before a race, soldiers before a mission, surgeons before a procedure. They use music not to entertain, but to align, to trigger the right physiological and psychological state on command. Because music is one of the few legal, socially acceptable ways to alter your body chemistry instantly. But here's what most people miss. Silence is not the opposite of music. It's part of it. The space between notes, the rest in the measure, that's where tension and release are born. Your body doesn't just react to sound, it reacts to expectation. And music manipulates that perfectly, building tension, delaying resolution, and then delivering emotional closure at just the right moment. In that way, music is time travel. It lets you live multiple emotional lives in 3 minutes. It compresses stories, sensations, and secrets into a single line of melody, and you carry it with you, not in your phone, but in your biology. So, next time you feel off, before the caffeine, the pills, the distraction, press play. Not as background noise, not as filler, but as medicine, as ritual, as recalibration. Let your pulse sink. Let your breath shift. Let your inner systems feel the rhythm, and remember, your body isn't just reacting, it's listening, updating, becoming. Because music isn't sound, it's software. And when the right song hits at the right moment, it's not just emotional, it's evolutionary. Heartache is memory, then conflict. You think you're heartbroken, you say it's grief, loss, longing, but the truth runs deeper. Heartache isn't just an emotional wound. It's a memory system under attack, a neural rupture. Your nervous system is receiving new data that violently contradicts what it believed to be true, what it counted on to be real. And when the brain's map no longer matches the territory of the world, it doesn't just feel sad, it feels unsafe. Because your brain isn't wired for happiness, it's wired for prediction. It builds models of people, routines, relationships, so it can predict what's coming next. That's how it protects you. That's how it saves energy. And when you love someone, they become a part of that internal map. Their voice, their smile, the way they text, the rhythm of their presence, it becomes integrated into your reality as a constant, not a hope, a certainty. Then, something shatters. A breakup, a betrayal, a sudden silence. And now, your nervous system is flooded with conflicting inputs. The person you expected to be there is gone. The habits you built around their presence are empty. The predictions your brain made about comfort, future, connection are invalid. You're not just feeling grief, you're crashing into corrupted memory code. Neuroscientists call this prediction error. When the expected outcome doesn't happen, the brain goes into recalibration mode. And when the discrepancy is emotional, when what you believe to be safe is now dangerous, painful, or gone, the recalibration isn't smooth. It's jagged. It's traumatic. It hurts. This is why heartbreak can cause physical symptoms. The chest tightness, the nausea, the insomnia, the emotional pain hijacks the same neural circuits as physical pain. Because to the brain, this is injury, not symbolic. Real. A survival threat. That person was part of your safety code. Their loss is rated as environmental instability, and this is where it gets even more devastating. Your brain doesn't just try to update the model. It tries to resist the update. It wants to believe the old data. It wants to hold on to the familiar path, the comforting loop, the identity that included them. So it replays memories. It rewrites conversations. It searches for signs that maybe it was all a mistake. This tug-of-war between old and new reality is what heartache really is. Not just missing someone, but clashing with the idea that the world isn't what you thought. You see their name and flinch. You wake up and remember, all over again, what's gone. That's the conflict. The system keeps checking for the old input, and every time it doesn't arrive, pain reactivates. But here's the strange grace inside this process. Eventually, the nervous system does adapt. It slowly rewrites the model. The person becomes a memory instead of a presence. The habits reroute. The brain forms new patterns, not because it forgets, but because it must. That's the biological mercy of heartbreak. It's agonizing, but it's also a transition from belief to truth, from illusion to clarity. And if you let it, the process reveals something profound. It shows you how much of your reality is held together by fragile agreements with the past. It shows you how quickly identity can fracture when even one assumption collapses. It shows you the deep cost of love, not just the risk of losing it, but the way it rewires your brain to depend on it. Heartache is not weakness. It is not oversensitivity. It is not failure. It's a system error, triggered by loss, corrected by grief, and healed through the slow, painful work of reprogramming. So, when it hurts, let it hurt. But also, understand why. This isn't just sadness. It's your brain trying to make sense of a new world, one where what used to feel safe no longer exists. And eventually, when the new data settles, when the nervous system accepts the silence, the pain fades. Not because you stopped loving, but because your brain finally updated the map. Sorting lists soothes fear. You sit down with a pen, or maybe it's your phone, and without even thinking, you start to list. Tasks, goals, groceries, fixes, dreams, you organize, you sort, you name. But this isn't about productivity. Not really. This is ritual, a soft, desperate form of psychological survival. Because when your world feels too large, too messy, too uncertain, making a list gives you the illusion that you can hold it. A list is not just a plan, it's a spell. You take chaos, unpredictable, formless, infinite, and compress it into bullet points, into order, into something you can cross off. It's not the crossing that matters. It's the feeling that, for a moment, your life has borders. That time can be trapped in ink or pixels, that if you write it all down, maybe, just maybe, it won't fall apart. This is fear management. When we panic, we grab for control, and listing is control's gentlest form. You're not solving the storm, you're naming the winds. You're not preventing disaster, you're alphabetizing it. The brain gets to pretend it's powerful, that fear can be itemized, that uncertainty can be stored in columns. And it works. Studies show that people who write down their worries, who create structured lists of stressors, actually feel better, even if nothing has changed. Not because the problems are solved, but because the mind has a container, something to hold the mess, something to tell the nervous system, we're doing something. We're managing it. But beneath the surface, something deeper is happening. You're performing a cognitive ritual. You're soothing a primitive part of the brain that's still scanning for lions and cliffs. Because to your amygdala, uncertainty is danger. Ambiguity is threat. And a to-do list, however small, is a map through that jungle. That's why people make lists they already completed, just to cross things off. That's why students rewrite their planner instead of studying. Why some people make packing lists for trips that aren't planned yet. Because it's not about the task. It's about the gesture, the performance of control, the comfort of seeing your world in rows and checkboxes instead of noise. But this comfort has limits, because sometimes lists become cages. You spend more time organizing than living. You stack tasks like bricks, thinking a taller wall will protect you. But what if it traps you? What if the need to organize is masking a deeper refusal to feel, a fear of what happens when the list ends and life begins? Perfectionists know this. So do the anxious. The list is a safety blanket, and like any safety blanket, the warmth is real, but it can keep you from confronting what's cold. You might say, I can't start until I've written it all out. But maybe the truth is, you're afraid to start. Because action is chaos, and lists, in contrast, are beautifully still. And yet, they help. They're not lies, they're scaffolding. Temporary structures to hold your mind upright until it can move again. A reminder that motion exists, that you are capable of sequence, that even if your heart is racing and the world feels ungraspable, you can still do one thing. So the next time you feel that itch, that need to pause and sort and number, don't dismiss it. Look at what your brain is doing. It's not just planning, It's protecting. You're not being lazy. You're trying to cope, to survive, to write your own script in a world where too many things are unscripted. Because in that moment, the list is your shield, a thin line of ink between you and the abyss. Touch as presence, confirmation. A hand on your shoulder, a hug that lasts 1 second too long. Fingers interlacing, a soft pat on the back. These aren't just gestures, they're signals. Coded messages passed from skin to skin, bypassing language, skipping thought, going straight to the part of you that still doubts you exist. Touch isn't decoration, it's confirmation. When someone touches you, really touches you, they're doing more than making contact. They're pressing against the boundary where your body ends and the world begins. And in that moment, you are reminded. You are here. You are felt. You are real. You are not invisible. This is why a hug can break someone's composure. Why holding hands can settle a panic attack. Why tapping the table, the wall, or even your own chest becomes a subconscious ritual of grounding. It's not habit. It's proof. You are anchoring yourself in a reality that often feels far too abstract. Because without touch, the edges of identity blur. You float. You dissociate. You retreat into your thoughts and lose track of the external world. But one solid, intentional touch can bring you crashing back into your body with undeniable force. It says, you are not imagining this. You are still part of this world. Even infants know this. Before language, before memory, touch is the first sense we trust. A newborn will stop crying in response to skin-on-skin contact. Not because they understand it, but because they feel it. Their brain, still forming, still raw, recognizes the signal: safety, presence, belonging. And the brain never forgets that lesson. As adults, we may pretend we've evolved beyond it, that we don't need comfort, that we can survive on screens and speech and solitude. But underneath that performance is a nervous system still wired to interpret touch as presence confirmation. It's why we crave it in grief, why we seek it in love, why we miss it most when we're lonely. Not the words, not the attention, but the contact. This is also why lack of touch can cause emotional fragmentation. Studies show that people deprived of regular physical interaction experience higher levels of stress, depression, and even immune suppression, because the body interprets the absence of touch as a warning sign. You are isolated. You are not being seen. You are not safe. The truth is, we touch to know we're still part of the map. When someone hugs you, holds you, brushes past you, and lingers, your body updates its coordinates. I exist in relation to something else. You don't just feel them, you feel yourself more sharply, more completely. Even self-touch does this. When you tap your fingers, rub your hands, or place your palm on your heart, you're not just soothing nerves, you're confirming territory. You're saying to yourself, I still have edges, I still take up space, I still count. And then there's the beauty of mutual touch, the kind that happens without planning, holding hands during a hard moment, a squeeze of reassurance, fingers tracing the outline of another person's hand. In these moments, two nervous systems become one feedback loop. It's not just physical, it's neurological. Oxytocin rises, heart rates synchronize, stress chemicals drop. The body listens to the signal and adjusts. We are not alone. We are not in danger. Touch tells the truth even when words cannot. When someone can't say, I love you, they hold your hand tighter. When grief makes speech impossible, a hand on the back says everything. When anxiety makes you float, someone putting their head on your shoulder anchors you to earth again. And even in silence, even when nothing else makes sense, touch reminds us of what is still here. But in today's world, we're forgetting this. We text instead of embrace. We like instead of hold. We wave from a distance instead of stepping forward. And we're suffering for it. Because the body does not believe in emojis. It does not interpret signals through pixels. It needs pressure. It needs presence. It needs the warm, unmistakable truth that someone else is choosing to close the distance. So, if you've ever held someone's hand a little too long, if you've ever touched your own face when no one else would, if you've ever tapped the table just to feel something, you were doing what your body has always known, seeking confirmation. You were reminding yourself that you're not a ghost, not invisible, not lost in thought, but here, now, tangible. So the next time someone reaches for your hand, don't pull away too quickly. And when you place your hand on your chest, don't dismiss it as a nervous habit. These gestures are survival signals, primal messages. They are not weakness. They are proof. Proof that your body still speaks the oldest language on Earth. Revisiting old photos loops. You open an old folder, you scroll, you click, and there it is. That photo. At first, it's just an image, some frozen frame of the past. But then, something strange happens. Your chest tightens. A scent, long forgotten, resurfaces. You can hear voices you haven't heard in years. And suddenly, you're not just remembering, you're re-entering. Because looking at old photos doesn't just jog your memory, it loops you. The human brain is not a passive archive. It doesn't store memories like files in a cabinet. It reactivates them, fully, emotionally, chemically. When you look at an old photo, your mind doesn't just say, I remember this. It says, we're here again. And for a moment, sometimes seconds, sometimes minutes, you become that version of yourself all over again. Neuroscientists call this reactivation. But in real life, it feels like possession. You feel the emotions of that day, the hopes you had, the pain you were hiding, the lies you believed. And if the photo is powerful enough, it can override who you are now. Suddenly your progress is gone. Your clarity, your logic, your distance, all erased by a 4x6 ghost. A single glance at a picture of your ex, and suddenly you're back in the kitchen with them, arguing about dinner. You see your childhood self, and the room gets smaller, tighter, harder to breathe in. You look at a group photo, and your brain starts rearranging your present social life based on a dynamic that ended 10 years ago. These aren't just images. They're keys to psychological backdoors. Memory isn't linear. It loops. It folds over itself. And photographs are the sharpest triggers we've ever created. They freeze time in visual code, but when we revisit them, they thaw. And when they thaw, they pull pieces of us with them. The clothes you wore, the way you thought, the mental scripts you followed without question, all of it reboots. Not because you want it to, but because the brain is wired that way. Old photos are dangerous that way. You think you're browsing, but you're time traveling. The face you see, your own, younger, isn't just a version of you. It's a version of how you process the world. And if you stare long enough, that version can whisper things into your present mind. Doubts, regrets, longings that don't belong here anymore. Ever noticed how hard it is to return to focus after scrolling through old images? That's not coincidence. It's memory hangover. You've just activated dormant neural pathways, some of them painful, some of them seductive, and your logical mind has to fight to take the wheel again. You were gone, even if just for a few minutes. Sometimes we revisit photos hoping to feel good, but nostalgia is never pure. It's grief wrapped in a soft filter. You see your old friends smiling, but you also remember the fallout. You see yourself happy and wonder when it slipped away. That ache you feel, it's not sadness, it's displacement. Your mind briefly forgot what year it is, and it's grieving the return. And then there's the deeper loop, the one where you become addicted to looking back. You revisit the same folder, the same day, the same memory again and again, trying to unlock something, trying to resolve it. But all it does is deepen the loop, because photos preserve illusion. You see what was, not what it felt like. You see a smile, but not the silence before it. You see a hug, but not the argument that followed. And your brain, desperate for resolution, keeps looping, trying to find the full truth in a single frame. It never will. Because a photo is a fragment, a timestamp without context. And when you loop on it, you risk rebuilding your present self based on incomplete data. You start making choices based on who you were, not who you've become. But there's power in knowing this. If you choose to revisit photos with awareness, you can reclaim the loop. You can re-enter with context, with distance. You can look at that old version of yourself and say, I see you, I remember you, but I'm not you anymore. And that breaks the script. You stop looping when you stop identifying. So the next time your finger hovers over an old album, ask yourself, am I remembering or reactivating? Am I visiting or being pulled in? Because the past is patient. It will wait in pixels and paper until you return. And when you do, it doesn't just say hello. It asks you to stay. And sometimes, staying costs more than you think. Fatigue shuts down. Doubt. You're tired. Maybe not the kind of tired that makes you collapse, but the slow, creeping kind. The the kind that dulls your edges. You don't notice it at first, but your decisions get lazier, your resistance thins, and then, without even realizing, it happens. You say yes when you meant no. You stop asking questions. You go along with things that feel off. This isn't just exhaustion, it's submission. Fatigue doesn't just drain your energy, it disarms your defenses. When you're tired, your brain isn't just slower. It's more agreeable. It stops questioning. It stops challenging. It stops doubting. Because doubt takes effort. Every act of skepticism, every moment you resist manipulation, question a motive, or second-guess a lie, demands energy. Your prefrontal cortex, the seat of higher thinking and self-control, requires fuel to function, and fatigue starves it. Sleep deprivation, physical exhaustion, emotional burnout, they all short-circuit the brain's executive functions. You react more than you reason. You comply more than you challenge. You become persuadable, not because you've changed your mind, but because your mind can't fight anymore. This is why fatigue is a tactic, not just a condition. Interrogators know this. Marketers know this. Even cult leaders know this. Wear someone down, keep them awake, flood them with information, make them repeat mantras, push them past their mental threshold, then offer a clear, simple answer. That's how beliefs are reshaped. Not by force, but by fatigue. You felt it too. After a long day when the world feels heavy, you turn on a screen and let it wash over you. Ads slip past your awareness. News stories shape your views. Social media scrolls feed opinions into your tired mind, and you absorb more than you think. Not because you agree, but because it's easier than thinking. This is not weakness. This is biology. Your brain prioritizes survival. When it's tired, it defaults to minimal effort. It shuts down critical thought like a computer in power save mode. And that's when outside influence sneaks in, quietly, efficiently. This is why cults don't recruit people when they're well rested. They wait until someone's grieving, displaced, exhausted. When a person is mentally overloaded, emotionally frayed, physically worn down, that is when a simple narrative becomes irresistible. Not because it's true, but because it's easy. It doesn't ask questions. It just tells you what to feel. And the scary part? You'll believe it was your idea. Even in everyday life, fatigue reshapes your mental landscape. Studies show that jurors are more likely to convict when tired. Doctors make more errors. People spend more money. You're more likely to say yes to things that don't serve you, just to end the conversation. This is why decisions made at night, during emotional exhaustion, or in the aftermath of crisis often lead to regret. Because you weren't fully present. You were running on emergency settings, your inner skeptic muted, your boundaries blurred. So how do you protect yourself? First, recognize the state. Fatigue hides itself. It doesn't always feel like sleepiness. It feels like apathy, or decision fog, or a quiet voice saying, "Whatever, I don't care anymore." That's your warning. Don't make big choices in that state. Don't sign contracts. Don't engage in conflict. Don't believe the first answer that feels convenient. Second, delay. If you're being pushed to decide something now, ask why. Real truth holds up under time. Manipulation doesn't. Third, recover. Sleep isn't a luxury. It's your firewall. Your critical thinking doesn't run without it. Neither does your emotional resilience. Sleep is not rest, it's resistance. And finally, trust your own doubts. They are not flaws, they are filters. They are the last line of defense when everything else begins to fade. When you're tired and the voice inside says, "This doesn't feel right," listen. That whisper might be the last part of you still standing guard. Because in the end, fatigue is more than weariness. It's an open door, and someone somewhere is always ready to walk through it. Human rituals are looped programs. You light the candle, sing the song, blow it out, another birthday, another loop. You don't question it, you just do it. The motions are familiar, rehearsed, almost sacred. But here's the truth. These aren't just traditions. They're programs. Ancient, embedded, subconscious code loops, executed across generations, running silently in the background of civilization. Birthdays, prayers, handshakes, funerals, they're not random rituals. They're operating systems for society. Rituals aren't optional. They're essential. They reduce chaos. They anchor meaning. They transmit values without explanation. When a baby is born, we name them, bless them, announce them. When someone dies, we gather, mourn, and bury with structure. These aren't just emotional expressions. They're data transfer points. They encode identity, belonging, grief, hope, and they do it through repetition. Because repetition writes deeper than reason. Anthropologists have traced this for centuries. Every culture, regardless of geography or language, creates rituals. Not just big ones like weddings or funerals, but micro-rituals. How you say hello, how you prepare food, how you exit a conversation. These patterns are rarely questioned because they're so embedded, but that's what makes them powerful. Rituals bypass the rational mind. They run on familiarity. They use motion to carry memory. Take handshakes. Originally a gesture to show you weren't carrying a weapon. Now, a silent exchange of trust. No words. Just contact. It's not logical anymore. But the meaning persists, hidden in muscle memory. Or think about prayers. Spoken words repeated for thousands of years. Whether or not one believes in their supernatural power, they act as grounding loops, scripts that connect the individual to something greater. Time folds in on itself when you repeat the words your ancestors once did. That's not just tradition. That's time-encoded code execution. Even birthdays, what are they really? Not just celebrations, but identity anchors. A day marked in time to remind both self and society. You exist. You belong. You matter. The cake, the candles, the circle of people. These are visual affirmations of continuity. Without rituals like this, identity would drift. Memory would fragment. Culture would collapse under its own weight. But here's where it gets deeper and more disturbing. Rituals can be hijacked. Because they run below awareness, they can be used to shape behavior, obedience, belief. Political ceremonies, school pledges, corporate slogans, even social media trends, they mimic ritual form, repetition, symbolism, group reinforcement, and they work. Because the brain is wired to follow patterns that feel sacred, even when they've been engineered. Psychologists have found that rituals reduce anxiety, even when participants know the ritual has no functional effect. That's the strange beauty of it. Rituals don't have to do anything to feel meaningful. They just have to repeat. That repetition convinces the nervous system. You are safe. You are seen. You are part of something. So, what happens when rituals vanish? Modern life is stripping rituals down to fragments. We replace gatherings with text messages. We avoid funerals, skip birthdays, eat alone. We've kept the calendar but deleted the ceremony. And something begins to fracture. Not visibly, but slowly. A sense of disconnection, of floating, of unreality. The brain is still searching for the loop, but it never closes. This is why grief feels worse without a funeral. Why love feels incomplete without ritual. Why change feels chaotic when it isn't marked. The brain needs symbols. It needs moments to be sealed by action. Without that, everything bleeds together. Losses don't finalize, joys don't crystallize, identity doesn't anchor. But there's a hidden opportunity in this. You can design your own rituals. They don't have to be inherited. They just have to be repeated. Burn a letter to let go. Say a word before sleep. Walk the same path after a decision. Anchor a moment with meaning. And soon, the loop forms. You write your own code. You become your own ritual keeper. Because in the end, we are not creatures of logic. We are creatures of rhythm, motion, and memory. And rituals, whether ancient or invented, are the loops that hold us together, long after the reasons have been forgotten.